Thank you, Mayor. Before we get started on the consent agenda items, if this is your first time joining us in this building, welcome. The restrooms are between those two double doors where the police chief is currently standing. So help yourself if you need to use the restroom during the meeting. We do have masks in the front if you don't have one and would like one. They're not required, but you can have the choice to wear one or not wear one. I handed out the closed session minutes, that's on the yellow paper, and also handed out a code enforcement update. This is just for your information, it's nothing for tonight, but it does kind of give you a heads up of what may be coming to you in the upcoming months with some code enforcement issues that may need some council action. So with that, I will go over the items on the consent agenda. First, of course, we'll go over our vision statement for the city, which is that Belmont will be a vibrant, multi-generational community that incorporates small town charm and heritage with an entrepreneurial spirit. So we only have 6 items on the consent agenda this evening. The first 3 are minutes from meetings in July. You've got the approval of the regular meeting minutes from July 6th, the approval of the workshop minutes, which is a special meeting from July 19th, and then, as I mentioned, you have a closed session minutes from the end of the July 19th meeting. So the first 3 items are minutes from July. Item 4 comes to you from the workshop on July 19th, and that is approval of the job description for an ABC detective position with the Belmont Police Department. This would be a new position added for the police department, but as the chief discussed with you at the workshop, this would be funded by the revenue we receive from the ABC board. So this position is not funded from just the general taxpayers like the rest of our police department positions are funded. And this would be filling all the legal obligations from the ABC regulations and ABC enforcement and education. Item 5 is approval of a resolution amending the approved meeting dates for 2021. Both Assistant City Manager Kevin Krause and I will be out of town on October the 4th, which is your regular meeting date. In October, we'll be at a conference. So we've asked that we move that to the following Monday, October the 11th. So you've got a resolution authorizing that change in the date. And then finally, on the consent agenda, you've got a request from the developers of the Morris at Belmont multifamily neighborhood on Wilson Boulevard. They are asking for a 2-year time extension request for their conditional rezoning approval. That was approved back in the summer of 2019, I believe, and they've run into some potential environmental issues that they were not aware of, so they were working through that program with the state, with the brownfields program, and then of course the cost of construction has gone up, and so they're trying to get a hold of the cost for construction so they can move forward on their project. But they are requesting a 2-year time extension to May 5th, 2023. So no changes in the plan, just a request to extend the approval for that. That's all that we have for the consent agenda. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
I have a question about the Morris time extension.
Yes.
So the extension would be, the original approval would have expired on May 6th of this year, and the extension accordingly is through May 5th of 2023, but the request is dated July 22nd. So has it already expired, or is there some sort of COVID extension, or how does that work?
So I'd ask Shelley to get the details, but I believe that was part of the COVID extension, if that's correct.
Yes, the state recognized the COVID period and for all approved projects granted a time extension. And if I look at my file, I think their time extension is good to the end of November of this year. So while talking with their attorney, we decided to go ahead and request a time extension, but we run that with the original conditional zoning. So
Okay.
They are still valid until the end of this year.
And the request is timely. So, okay, thank you.
Adrian, do we know what's triggering the brownfield? I know it came from Spartan Dyers. Are they speculating that? Is there any preliminary information on the size, or do we have anything to go on other than they've discovered some pollutants?
I'm not aware of the details of it. Mr. Russell, do you know any background on the environmental issues?
I don't have any input on that. Other than they looked at there's some different options. One of them is a brownfield application, but they also talked about insurance, addressing environmental issues through insurance policies. So that's one issue. And the other issue is the accelerated construction costs due to the COVID. That's why
All right, is this anywhere near Abbey Creek? It runs through there. Is any potential hazard or damage to the creek that anyone's aware of at this time? Don't know. Okay.
I'm not aware of any.
Okay. And I just had one other question about the new position, the police department. The new position, I think we talked, the language created to fund that is going to include that it is specifically funded by the revenues from the ABC board in perpetuity.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The motion to approve the consent agenda.
We have to go to open meeting.
All right, call the meeting to order. Got to set the agenda. Who's going to set the agenda?
set the agenda.
Jim always sets the agenda. All right.
I'll second.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. I'm going to ask James Almond, Reverend James Almond, to do the invocation and pledge of allegiance by Jim Hepburn.
Let us pray. God our Father, among the great gifts that you have given to mankind is the gift of civil government, by which order is maintained, by which the common good is advanced in the community. Thank you for these leaders you have appointed. Lord, we pray that you will give to them wisdom, and Lord, you will guide their decisions. May all that is done here tonight and in the ongoing work of the city of Belmont, Lord, be for the upbuilding of the community, Lord, for the good of the people who live herein. Father, all this we pray in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, our great King. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next, public comment. Do we have any signed up for public comment?
Thank you, Shelley.
A lot of comments, huh?
Well,
Okay. All right. Item C1, nothing. Item C2, which is the closing of the portion of Acme Road. We've got several people signed up to speak to that. State your name, address.
So this is a continued public hearing on the
Yeah.
closure. And so Parks, do we need to make any sort of motion? Or? Okay, we're still in.
Hearing, so but this is, the hearing is being continued, so you'll pick up where you left off.
Yeah.
Okay.
Your public comment now.
Okay, but I understand that we have some updated information from the city. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. So we do have folks who have signed up to speak tonight, and so you can certainly allow them to speak since we're still in public hearing. Our planning director, Shelley DeHart, will give you a brief update of what has transpired since the last city council meeting in July. And just as a reminder of the scope of this hearing and this action, I'd ask the city attorney to talk about the statutory process for the closing of the closing of the street or abandonment of the right-of-way, and how this is different from a rezoning hearing.
Well, it's two separate things. So I just remind you that in a street closing, your only job is to make two findings, that this is a public purpose to close the street and it doesn't cut off access to anybody's property. There is no place for alignment in the street closing discussion, because the alignment was decided 2 years ago in the conditional zoning. And there was public hearings, no due process violations, and so you can't change that without the consent of the property owner that acquired the vested rights under the conditional zoning. Remember, the law is once they get approved and they go out and spend money based on the vested rights that they've acquired, which in this case would be substantial, maybe 6 figures or more, that if you unilaterally change that, then you incur liability potentially for those vested rights damages that they've expended funds for. So just to keep you focused, the street closing issue is, again, public purpose, doesn't cut off access to anybody's property. Okay, any questions about that?
What, in terms of public purpose, like define, can you define
Very
that?
broad.
Very broad.
It'd be hard not to find a public purpose
Yes.
in
Any rational basis.
right.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you, Parks. So Shelley, can you give us a brief update?
Yes, I will. So if you can recall, the public hearing was opened up at the council's July meeting. Can't hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so the public hearing for this project was, this road closure request was at the July meeting. At the July meeting, concerns were voiced by the pastors and members of Goshen Presbyterian Church, focused in the area of safety, noise, and ADA access. Staff followed up the same week with the pastor. A field inspector and myself met with the pastor on site, which was on July 8th. The development team also followed up with the pastor and a member of the church on July 22nd. That was Mr. Trey Little. So while on site for both staff's meeting and the development team's meeting, we tried to focus on the concerns that were voiced at the public hearing with regard to safety. We did evaluate the church new location onto Acme Road. Now it was incorporated within the realignment design to allow for safe ingress and egress per NCDOT. We talked about the installation of a possible landscape buffer that could be installed between the public sidewalk and the site adjacent to the sanctuary, which could act as a barrier if there's concern about children just running out into Acme Road from the site. With regard to noise, again, on site, we focus primarily adjacent to the sanctuary. The sanctuary is approximately 40 feet from the actual proposed roadway. We discussed a minimum 10-foot wide landscape buffer could be installed across the property line between the sanctuary and the future road alignment that would aid in noise protection. So looking at that and talking with landscape architects, we focused on the type of planting. We feel that evergreen shrubs would be the best plants for noise because they provide a year-round noise reduction barrier. We also heard at the last meeting concerns about access into the church, ADA access. We did evaluate the proposed road realignment, site modification, the new driveway, and found that this project would not affect the current pedestrian accessibility as currently used around the church. So what this plan is, and it's also in your packet, is we asked the applicant to provide an aerial photograph and lay the proposed road realignment over the photo. I'm going to zoom in really quickly here. So what this shows is the approximate location of the sanctuary, the proposed roadway. It also shows the driveway location, which would align with their access drive in the back of the church, so they would be able to drive straight out to Acme Road. This driveway was planned at that location, along with the driveway for the city's water tower for access as well. So the roadway design was aligned in that manner with a break in the roadway striping just to accommodate and enhance safety going in and out of both the city site and the church site. Now, we did spend some time with NCDOT talking about the existing Acme Road alignment that was mentioned at the last meeting. The realignment was needed to move the intersection away from the curve, creating a better sight distance. The photo on your right shows the existing configuration. Also, the TIA, the traffic impact analysis for the project, did determine an additional right turn lane was needed at Acme and Woodlawn, adding an additional lane to the intersection, which, if kept at the existing spot, would introduce a new hazard at that intersection. Also, the site access points and site design was designed to accommodate the use along with spacing for safe movement in and out of the site by the tractor trailers. I did want to read into the record a statement that we received from Blake Guffey, the district supervisor at NCDOT Division 12. He says, the relocation of Acme Road allows for better sight distance as the original location was in a vertical and horizontal curve on Woodlawn Road near Oaks Parkway. The realignment was designed to ensure appropriate driveway locations in and out of the site onto the road with adequate spacing for tractor-trailer turning movements. The Quezon Street realignment was initiated by the developer to facilitate better site constructability. The department issued the driveway permits for the site through evaluation of the traffic impact document and working closely with city staff. The department also required the new sections of Acme and Quezon be built to state standards. Based on the traffic study, the driveway connections and relocated intersection of Acme and Quezon will provide for safe and efficient vehicle operations along the affected route. So that was from Blake. Yes, sir.
That's your question. And I don't know if the TIA addressed this or not, but did they consider, when they were realigning, possibly realigning it over here to match up with the Oaks Office Park to make these two industrial commercial entrances a four-way stop? Was that addressed? I mean, if you're going to move it.
There is the approved site, which I will show you in a few minutes, actually has a driveway at that location that aligns with the Oaks, but it is not a public street. The project was approved with the realignment of the street away from that curve. So to follow up with the development team met again with the pastor and a member of the church. They have indicated they intend on continuing to work with the members of the church to address as many of their concerns as is practical and to develop a landscape buffering plan for the area adjacent to the newly realigned Acme Road. So this, as you can recall, is the approved site plan, and as you can see, it does have a driveway across from the Oaks, but it is not a public road. That is to allow for internal circulation on the side of the tractor trailers going in and out of the office warehouse areas and the parking area, so they're not circulating in a public street. So with that, that concludes my presentation.
Shirley, I have one question. You said how many feet between the church and the street with the realignment?
It's 40 feet
Okay.
approximately from the sanctuary to the edge of the roadway.
Thank you.
Then you have a sidewalk, a little open space,
Right.
and then their property line.
Thank you.
A couple questions.
Yes, sir.
This buffer that would be built, would that be located on the applicant's property?
So as shown in your attachment, and let me go to the crosshatched area, actually shows it on the back of the sidewalk, some of it on the back of the sidewalk and some on the applicant's property.
Okay. Who would be responsible for maintaining the buffer?
Within the right-of-way, it would be NCDOT.
Okay. How close so there's an easement, is that correct? So talk to me about the easement.
Okay, so the applicant worked with the pastor of the church to get a construction easement, if that is what you're speaking to,
Yes.
which is on the subject property. It is the location of, there's an existing driveway over there. So when I met on site with the pastor, we talked about what kind of landscaping. So during construction, all of that would be cleared, but then if moving forward, a landscape buffer could be constructed, and part of that and across the property line. Part of the concern is to ensure that the buffer isn't too wide, because they do circulate from the front door area to the side door for pedestrian access as well. So that wanted to be maintained, the pastor indicated.
So if it's a construction easement, would that mean that when construction is finished, the easement
Needs to be restored,
Restored.
cleaned up, and if
It
a
goes-
buffer is needed, yes.
Okay.
Yes, and that's something that the developer works out with the property owner.
Okay. But so it's not a permanent easement.
It is not a permanent, it's a construction easement only.
Would the church, so if the buffer is within the right-of-way, is the church going to be responsible for any maintenance of the buffer?
Well, if the buffer straddles the property line, and as shown here, it does straddle the property line, they would be responsible for any housekeeping on the internal side of the buffer. And that was one reason, a discussion about utilizing some evergreen shrubs, fast growing, that you'd want to create a thick barrier in that area to help reduce noise.
And Mr. Heffron, with reference to that, one of the first things I did was go home and call Susan Wall, who's our master gardener on Keep Belmont Beautiful, for a recommendation. And the planting that she recommended would require minimal maintenance and would be about 10 feet wide at its full growth pattern if the group decides to use that.
How close to the sanctuary would construction get? So there's a construction easement. Does that necessarily mean that construction activities are going to occur to the maximum extent of the easement?
It is based on the agreement between the developer and the applicant, but typically if there's a easement, that's the limit of any disturbance of storage, and it's only needed to build out the sidewalk and get everything, the grading within the public right-of-way. That is what the construction easement's needed for.
Is anything, other than the landscape buffer, is any portion of this road or any construction actually going to take place on the church's property?
The only construction that will take place on the applicant's property would be the new driveway that's required to be built from their property, connecting their existing driveway out to Acme Road, and any work that is done within, not encroaching outside of that construction easement. But the roadway is completely in the right-of-way outside of their property boundaries.
Okay. What's the city property here? There's a water tower, like, so I've read that the city co-signed the application to abandon the road. What portion is the city's property?
It is where you see the city's driveway access there. The city actually owns all the property to the church's property line. So it's a shared property line. So the entire 50-foot right-of-way is part of the applicant's property to the north and the south, and the city's property in the middle.
And does, the church is currently situated, does not have access to Acme Road, is that correct?
That's correct. They have another driveway that NCDOT requested be closed on Woodlawn because of the turn movement and the realignment. They asked that that be closed.
Who asked that? I'm sorry.
I believe NCDOT
Okay.
was a requirement of the realignment, and then the applicant reached out, and my understanding started discussing the issue with the church.
Shirley,
And the pastor may be able to address that.
can I ask you, why did DOT sort of pass this cup to us? Why did they, it is their state road, why did they defer this hearing to us? Why did they not go through whatever their process is?
With regard to this road closure and this public hearing, this is part of a normal process that's done with all requests for road closures. It still has to go through the the NCDOT board for final action, but this is an action required at the city level before it goes to the state. The state basically, when the project was approved, NCDOT supported the realignment of Acme Road and Quezon per the approval. It reviewed the traffic study, approved that as well. It approved the construction plans for the realignment and has issued the driveway permits for this realignment. So this is the natural next step to be done. It's just procedure.
All right. Is this site by the fire tower, are we considering putting the public safety station there? Is that one of the sites that we considered or looking at for a firehouse in North Belmont?
Yes, sir.
It is. All right, Parks, let me ask you about some language, because, you know, some people were talking last time about this being a done deal, et cetera. Page 39 in our packet, if City Council decides to close the street segment. Page 41, from Planning and Zoning, the granting of this request is at the discretion of City Council. From Mulholland, and Cooper, page 42, in the event the withdrawal from dedication is approved. From P&Z on page 45, consider approval of an ordinance to permanently close a portion of Acme Road. So we're saying that we have to do it, it's a done deal. This language, I may not be interpreting it correctly, but it seems to be saying to me, we have the option to either do it or not do it.
That's true.
Okay, so
Let me,
the done deal part came, I heard that last time with regard to the realignment. So don't confuse that with the road closing, because that's a whole different thing that brings up. So as far as the road closing goes, which is what this public hearing is about, it's the same as any public hearing. It's all in your, everything's in your discretion. You're not forced to vote yes on anything. You always have the right to vote up or down. It's just that the standards and the guidelines that you're given to make your decision lead you into the discussion about the two points that you're required to find, which is it's in the public interest or not contrary to the public interest, and that it doesn't deprive anybody accessing or ingress and egress to their property. So those are the two things for tonight's action. It's the same as any action that you have here. I mean, like everything's in your discretion.
But I think Parks also explained some of the repercussions of how we choose to exercise that discretion based upon the findings that we're required to make. But I mean, we can, you're absolutely right that we, you know, it's within our discretion, but, you know, that the exercise of that discretion may have various consequences.
Yes.
Shelley, my understanding was this was a continuation so that the applicant and some of members of the church could discuss solutions. Has there been a solution found that they would like to redo?
I'll have to turn that over to the applicant. What was received from the applicant, which is in your packet, is they met on site. They spoke about a buffer, the driveway location. They've indicated they'll continue to work with the church to address their concerns as much as possible. Again, there was discussion and we looked into, can the road shift closer to the water tower? No, it cannot shift in that direction. It was relocated based on a collaboration, evaluation for safety from its original location to this location. And that's as far as we took the discussions, and I read NCDOT sent that final statement and asked if I'd read it into the record.
Shelley, since we are considering putting a fire station there, how much did that play into not wanting to realign the road over closer to the water tower? Or did it play into it at all?
Staff did not discuss that when evaluating that project with NCDOT or the applicant, as far as I'm aware. We evaluated it based on the merits of the project, the existing roadway, and site design requirements.
Just one more thing. So there's also, we talked about there is not current access via Acme Road. There's a driveway via Woodlawn that DOT has recommended be closed. Is there also access to the property from Roper Street? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
There's circulation and parking.
So there would be a driveway from Acme as, you know, with the realignment, there would be a driveway from Acme and the ingress and egress from Roper Street.
That's correct.
Okay. Mark, did you have any questions?
No, I mean, it's just an unfortunate situation. You know,
well, we've got public comment.
We have people signed up to speak.
Yes.
Thank you, Shelley.
Thank you, guys.
I do have a sign-up sheet. All right. First person to sign up is Elizabeth Atterbury. You know the routine, state your name and address.
Elizabeth Atterbury, 403 North Main Street, Belmont. I was not born here, but have been a resident of Belmont for 48 years, married to Bob, who was born in Belmont and lived here all his life. I come before you as a concerned resident of this great city. Bob and I are both heavily involved with the Belmont Historical Society, thus we are interested in preserving the history of this area. That being said, I would like to address the situation that is happening in North Belmont and Goshen Presbyterian Church. Goshen is the oldest church west of the Catawba River, dates back to the 1750s. Goshen began with a humble beginning. Immigrants from Scotch, Scotch-Irish, and German families were traveling from the north into the Piedmont and decided to settle. Goshen began with a brush arbor, then a log cabin, several wood frame structures, and now the current brick building. In the cemetery, you will find graves of veterans dated as far back as the American Revolution and the Civil War. The oldest marked tombstone is dated August 10th, 1787. Goshen has been the mother church to 8 other Presbyterian churches in Gaston County, including First Presbyterian Belmont and Mount Holly. Goshen has survived through the hands of God a revolution, Southern Depression and Reconstruction, a national economic depression, mill industry rise and decline, as well as several foreign wars, many presidents, many governors, and the most recent, COVID-19, that has had the church congregation struggling over the last year. But they continue to be strong. Goshen has been an important part of North Carolina, Gaston County, and Belmont for more than 2.5 centuries, and they hope to be around for many more years to come. A few questions. Why can't a traffic light be placed at the existing Acme and Woodlawn intersection? Could it not be moved east to intersect with the Oaks Parkway? This would seem to help both the industrial parks and also control traffic speed on Woodlawn. Will there be any other outlets from the new industrial park on the Woodlawn? If so, why does Acme need to be redesigned? What about the fall zone for the water tank? And moving the road, will this work? In moving Acme Road, this will hinder the only handicap access to the church building. Also, there is concern with large trucks and other traffic being so close to the church property. In closing, I'm a visual person, I'm not an engineer, and have a hard time with all the blueprints, site plans, etc. But once I see actual flags or other types of markers, it becomes evident of what is planned. I think that city planners, engineers, etc. could sometimes be a little more helpful to the residents of the city. Thank you for your attention and consideration. This is the fastest I've ever talked in my life.
I agree. The next person we have signed up to speak is Reverend James Alvin.
James Allman, 1885 Perfection Avenue in Belmont, well, just outside the city limit, but the church is in. Wanted to address 4 issues very quickly, 2 pertaining timing and 2 pertaining sort of understanding of the process. One, the city council at the last meeting was sort of surprised when we brought all these questions up, and we wanted to explain why this came up the way it did. You have to understand, this is the first time we had seen a sign announcing a hearing that was exclusive to the road. We have no objections to the development. We have never had any objections to the development. We're actually, at least speaking for myself, I'm in favor of the development, bringing jobs to the community and bringing more people within the sphere of influence of our congregation to witness to them with the gospel of Jesus Christ. I mean, if you're bringing us people, obviously I'm for it. We want this. The road is the only thing which caused us concern. And so when we saw a sign that had the road highlighted in red and said public hearing, we thought this would be the time. The sign didn't say it was only about one aspect, it just showed the road. Also remember, as you saw in the timeline, even tonight, almost all the meetings happened in late 2019 or 2020 and early 2021. Our church was hit like everyone else with the pandemic. Our session for much of the year did not even meet in person. If you don't know what a session is, I'll get to that just in a moment. So that explains why some of the timing is coming up. As to understanding, we've been a little confused, as was brought up, the fact that this is a city dealing with a state issue. So sometimes it feels like we're talking to the city when we really wish we could ask questions of the state. And that's not your fault. It's just an unfortunate sort of binding together of 2 threads that were one community, many threads, but these 2 threads aren't meshing that well. It's odd to ask questions of you when we wish we could speak to the DOT. And finally, just to let you know about our church polity, as people ask, well, did anyone speak to the church? What you need to understand is Presbyterian churches are governed by elders. Each congregation has its own elders. We own our own property. We're even our own corporation.
We don't have any denominational hierarchy that oversees these matters. Anything that's been talked about with me doesn't become official. I'm merely a spokesman, much like the mayor at a public event or speaking to an outside entity. I can speak broadly, but I cannot sign a deal until I take it back to my fellow elders and have them look at it. So you need to understand, as you've heard, talk has happened, but we've approved nothing yet because we need a final plan. This is what we'll do, this is what will happen, and that would have to go to the elders, and we would probably end up taking that to the whole congregation for their consideration. So just so you understand, for the city's information, I know,
It's 3.
yeah, 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have signed up to speak Irvin Sims, 202 Johnson Drive. Irvin?
Irvin Sims. I live at 202 Johnston Drive here in Belmont. First of all, I want to say that it's amazing that anything gets built in any community because there's a lot of stuff that goes on, and I appreciate the hard job you have. But consider this. What if one day you woke up and found out that the yard next to your yard was all of a sudden going to become a road, and what was once just a pleasant look out your window is going to be a big street coming right past your bedroom? And we found this out basically in December, in which we were told this was in essence a done deal. This was in essence a done deal, which in a way I think, sir, you are implying that. But if you look at the map, and today it was even more thin, some of that line, one of those lines actually touches the building of the church. I'm thinking, wow, this is amazing. As the pastor said, we're all for the construction of the warehouse and the stuff. It's good for the economy. But you bring a street right next to your bedroom window, and all of a sudden, that changes the complexion of a lot of things. You've got your job to do. But you've got to understand, we don't like this idea. We think this is a terrible idea. The more I look at this map, I say, my goodness gracious. It should have hit me stronger, but for some reason today, it struck me even stronger before. And the driveway coming out of the warehouse is right into the proposed driveway into our church. So like an 18-wheeler could come right out of the warehouse and drive. If we didn't have the little building to stop it, could have come right on through that next little road. It's amazing. You're going to do what you got to do. You're going to do what you got to do. But it's amazing what this is, and it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. And we should have known better. We should have heard sooner and had an opportunity to express opposition sooner. Much of this planning was done over a year before we heard anything about it. And that is not right. And so we ask you to consider that when you make your final decisions. Thank you very much.
Next signed up to speak is Jackie Eaton.
Good evening. My name's Jackie Eaton. I live at 731 Woodlawn Avenue. And I am so far out of my comfort zone, you would not believe. But I've been a member of Goshen for over 30 years, and it's been my home church for over 30 years. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you for your service to Belmont. I don't understand why Acme Road has to be relocated to just a few feet from our sanctuary. Goshen Church has been in this location for 65 years. I can't imagine the disruption to our services and our activities. I want to speak about the lack of information that was given to Goshen Church concerning Acme Road. Two parties were directly affected by the city's decision to move the road. The developer who was consulted and Goshen Church, who we feel was not consulted. We feel we should have been contacted by mail or phone call or some direct communication from the city explaining what was in the plans. On July the 20th, 2021, the civil engineer placed stakes at the proposed new road only parallel with the water tower. They didn't go down any further. They didn't go all the way to Woodlawn and put stakes. We have no idea how close that'll be. Then and only then could you see how close this road would be to our church. That was my understanding then of how close it's going to be. The stakes still have not been placed, like I said, to the end of Woodlawn. After the July the 6th council meeting, I personally sent every council member an email inviting each one of you to come by and see how close this road is going to be to us. The pastor was willing to meet with each one of you. I received one response, and that was from the Mayor Pro Tem. Why no response from others? And is he speaking for everyone? I don't know what the process is, but no one else came. I was also told in his response that the council listens to the public. Well, here we are, too many questions and not enough answers. Many other solutions are available to this council, one of which, putting a traffic light at the present Acme Road where it intersects with Woodlawn. This was also control traffic and speed. For the safety of our congregation, children and elderly, please vote no to relocating Acme Road. Please do the right thing, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next we have Dewey Byers signed up to speak. Better known as Choosy.
Well, my name is Dewey Byers. I reside at 102 Eagle Road in the great city of Belmont. And I appreciate you guys and what you do. We thank you for your service to this city. And I think we got the best city manager in the world. So we just appreciate all of you so much. And we thank you for listening to us tonight. I got a bunch of stuff I wanted to say, but since we saw all these pictures and all that stuff, I'll just address a few things. Thank you for coming, Mayor Pro Tem, out to the site to see just how close this building was. If you look at your map, if you look at that map again, can you put it up there? If you look at this map again, if you look at it, yeah, okay, I'm sorry. If you look, yeah, if you look at your map, if you look at this map again, and you see the church building drawn out here, the sanctuary sits back further, which is about 40 foot from where you would be. But if you notice the dotted line, see the little dotted line there? That's the proposed easement, okay? According to my measurements, which I've been in the poison oak and everything out there measuring, it's only 4 foot from the handicap entrance there. And we'll have heavy equipment in there tearing up the driveway and all that stuff. Question I have is, if they tear the foundation of our church up, who's going to pay for it? It's going to go on us, okay? We don't know, we got two stakes up at this end across from there, where the handicap entrance is. That is only 20 feet. I measured it myself. It's only 20 foot from the line, okay? And then we don't have any stakes to know how much property you're going to take at the end of our driveway. It's going to cut across there somewhere. We have no idea because there's not a stake down there to show us where it is. The other thing is that the buffer is going to take up about 10 more feet of our property. Then you're going to have growth on the property, and it's going to keep growing over, and more encroachment onto our property. So we're giving up 10 foot of property here. You're going to take some down at the end of the road. and we didn't ask for this. We don't even want to be here. We want you to just leave us alone in North Belmont, like you usually do when things come up. With that said, I beg you not to close the Acme Road. You got other options, lots of other options. A stoplight would be so simple. I mean, so simple, I guess nobody thought about it. Put up a stoplight there. We've been incorporated in North Belmont in the city limits since the late 50s, early 60s, somewhere. I'm not sure exactly when it was. But Acme Road has been there for 85 years. I know because I'm 85 years old. Okay? Oh, time? Okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next person signed up to speak is Jen Johnson.
Hello, and my name is Jen Johnson. I reside at 243 13th Street. And I am also a member of Goshen Presbyterian Church. My concern also is the moving of Acme Road. If your plans to continue as they are drawn up, you will come extremely close to our church. I don't know if you have given any thought to what could happen to the foundation of our sanctuary. With warehouses come trucks. They carry products from A to point B. They come in all sizes, and I'm most familiar with tractor trailers. If they make a wrong turn, you have a major roadblock. My husband drove most of our married life. He also was the owner-operator of our own truck. I know that a tractor trailer and load can max up to 80,000 pounds. How many of these will come by our church a day, a month, a year? Eventually, there will be repercussions if this plan continues. I can say this because I was on the road with my husband. I've seen a lot, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You have truckers sitting for hours to load or unload. Read into that what you want. We had our own in the truck. That's the potty, that is. You have the clean and not so clean, and sometimes unwanted guests. But this comes later after all the construction is said and done. How much do you think all this heavy equipment weighs? Maybe several tons. We pray you change the outlet for Acme Road, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker we have is Tracy Byers.
Hey, I'm Tracy Byers, and I live with Chusey on Eagle Road. And I would like to thank you all for your service and your time. Richard, you asked about who brought up the moving of Acme Road. According to the DOT, the city of Belmont actually required the Acme Road be relocated as part of the rezoning. I would like to know if the location of the new portion was decided by the city or the developer or Belmont Industrial LLC, which I'd really like to know a little bit more about, and its ties to the city. Can't find much about it. The state also says, as Shelley said, the requirements designed to ensure appropriate driveway, blah, 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 turn-in of the trucks. That sounds a lot like something being done for the benefit of the business to me, and not just a safety issue as previously given as the reason for the realignment. And if this is truly only a safety issue, a traffic signal, which is already slated per the DOT, there will be a traffic signal at the new road. And a no right turn sign, a no right turn on red sign at the existing entrance solves that problem in a more fiscally responsible manner and removes the encroachment problem to Goshen. And if this really is a safety issue, Where's the concern for the church members, especially the handicapped and the kids? How terribly unsafe is it to have tractor trailers driven in hazardous weather that close to their drive and their parking lot? Which brings up another question. If this is all about safety, why is the city just now suddenly concerned with Acme Road? It's been there for at least 60 years because that's how old I am. Was it not unsafe for when only the mill workers and community members traveled on that road and Woodlawn for years? Why is it now a problem now that there's going to be a business? And my last question to you is, if this vote goes through, how do you think the city will be viewed when word spreads that a small historical church that has and continues to assist a community that most of the town of Belmont regards as lesser than was basically bullied? Putting profit over people is never a good image. It seems that the city wants the tax dollars, but it wants to do so by placing industry far away from the pretty people and in an often marginalized and underserved area. Maybe the money saved from realignment could be used for a park or something to serve this community. Thank you again for your time.
Next, we have signed up to speak John Russell.
Good evening, John Russell, 23 Circle Drive in Belmont. Of course, I'm here as the attorney on behalf of the applicant and property owner. I got this sense in Shelley's presentation that there were some questions from council, and I'd be happy to take any questions and answer them, and I do want to address some of the specific ones. But let me start with just at least acknowledging the legal issue that's before council. The statute that brings us here, that's the basis for the public hearing, 160A299, as you've heard, is narrow. The title of that statute is the procedure for permanently closing a public street. So the issue that we're here on from a legal standpoint is the burden met and is the evidence before you and are the facts before you to close the street? There's not anything in 299. There's no public hearing that addresses realignment or relocation or where that goes. And that's because, as you've already heard, the site plan and the alignment was approved in November of 2019. And that's with the conditional zoning, that's when that is set. The statutes require us to then come back to address the closing of Acme in its current location. And that's really the limits, and that's the scope of the public hearing. There are two things that have to be shown and have to be met for that to go forward. One is that there's a public purpose to the closing of the street or the alleyway. And the second is that no property owner along Acme where it currently sits will be deprived of reasonable access to their property. So those are the two findings that need to be met. Staff has talked fairly extensively, and I won't repeat that, about the public purpose. And I think the safety concerns, that's been addressed to the applicant in the past about some grading, some sightline issues. That part of the realignment is to address that. Another part is DOT's plan for Woodlawn and feeling that some turn lanes are required both at Acme and then a little bit to the east to Quezon. So both of those things I would contend qualify as a public purpose, one of the findings that you need to make, one of the pieces of evidence you need to see. There can be others, that's not a limited thing, but I think those are pretty clear, and that comes to you from staff. There's no property owners on Acme currently other than the city and Belmont Industrial, the applicant, and neither will be deprived of reasonable access to their property. So both findings are met from the purpose of the public hearing and what we're here for. At the July meeting, the request came back from council to have the developer reach out to the church, to meet with them, and to discuss potential solutions to where the approved location of Acme is going to go and what can be done in terms of buffering. Could the road be moved a little bit to the east? Was that a possibility? And so that was done. The developer looked at options for trying to relocate the road. And they're really, I guess since I'm here on behalf of the applicant, I did want to address some of the questions. The public purpose one, there was a question about whether there was a meeting, and so I'd like to do that. And I think Councilman Schrift had a question also that I wanted to try to get to. So I'll wrap up quickly if it's all right.
That was
Well, we've got to be careful because we only allowed everybody else to speak 3 minutes. So procedurally, is that okay or not? I mean, that's.
Unless y'all have questions, his time's up.
Yeah, that's what I think.
If you have any questions of us, you're welcome to ask us the questions.
I don't hear any questions.
And so what did you say the two public purposes were? I'm sorry, I was concerned about timing issues at the moment.
Yep, so what you all heard from staff from public purpose, and certainly we would agree, was that part of the reason the site plan was developed the way it is because there's safety concerns with Acme in its current location. And part of the reason to close that is to address those safety concerns. The other thing was that DOT has recommended and wants turn lanes, right-hand turn lanes on Woodlawn. Both of those are part of the current site plan and conditional zoning that's been approved. So both of those would be a public purpose in terms of benefit to the public to closing the road.
Can you lay out the conversation between the developer and the church? If they reached out, you were kind of going down about moving.
Sure.
What occurred during that dialogue?
So as part of going back, they did reach out to Pastor Allman, and they met on site the week of July 20th. I think it was the 22nd they were out there. The city asked them to stake out the location where the current, where the new driveway, the construction easement that you've heard about, the new driveway that's going to be constructed, where that will enter Acme Road. That was done. And so then they looked at areas and opportunities for buffering. They talked a little bit about the types of buffering or planting that could be there. And the developers applicants made a commitment to continue to work with the church as much as is practical to construct and plant a buffer that will be acceptable at the location between the new road and the church building.
Any other questions for John? Go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have some follow-up for staff based on some of the. Oh.
Anybody else signed up? Charlie, did anybody else signed up?
I'm sorry, what?
Is anybody else signed up to speak?
No one
Okay.
signed up.
All right.
That was the last one.
Okay, sorry. I saw the list. That's why I knew. So just a couple of follow-up for Shelley and/or Adrian to address some of the comments that I was noting. There were several comments about a traffic light. Obviously, that's not a decision that we can make, is it? Is that something that would have to come from DOT? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would, because they're in CDOT roads, yes. And again, part of that came out of the traffic study as far as the need for turn lanes, access points, and signalization, which was done with the city's traffic consultant as well as NCDOT.
Okay.
And I would also add that this is the intersection of two state roads, Woodlawn
Yes.
and Acme, and the city doesn't have the authority to put a traffic signal on state system. That has to come from NCDOT.
Mhm.
So there was a mention about a known safety concern with the intersection that the city hasn't done anything about, and that's because it's the intersection of two state roads. So we've informed NCDOT of our concerns about the safety of the intersection, but we can't do
Yes.
that because that's the state's
Except that this
responsibility.
gives us the opportunity to do that as part of the rezoning and the project, whereas until such time, we didn't have that opportunity, because that
That's
was
correct.
going to be one of my questions.
Okay.
You anticipated that, very good. Who decided on the location of the realignment? My understanding was it was decided jointly between the city engineer, the developer's engineers, and NCDOT engineers. Is that correct?
And the city's transportation consultant as well. We all evaluated the site plan.
Okay. And that was the determination of the
Yes.
best location?
Yes.
So there was questions about ADA access. I believe you said during your presentation that ADA access would not be restricted.
Yeah, yes, I followed up with Trey Little, who met with the pastor and a member of the church on the 22nd. I specifically asked about that, and he said that the ADA access based on the roadway realignment and adding a buffer there would not impact the ADA access as it's used today. What I didn't hear is there's some more discussion about what about the construction easement, would that impact? I don't know the answer to that. And the applicant, Mr. Little, I do not believe is here this evening, but I can follow up with him about that issue. What happens during construction?
Okay. I heard some comments about the fall zone from the water tower. Has there been any discussion about that?
Is Jerry Hatton here? No, he's not here. We asked the city engineer to evaluate the road movement, the tower, and for its operation. They felt the alignment is at a location that could continue the operation of the water tower operations safely, but it could not, the road could not be shifted any closer. So I don't know what that means as far as fall zone.
And I'm assuming the city engineer would be the one that would have any insight into foundational concerns about the building as a result of any passing traffic.
We could ask him. I can't answer that question, sir.
Yeah.
Why is he not here? Is he on vacation or?
I'm not sure why he's not here.
I mean, this would seem to be a meeting he would need to be at.
I'll pass that along.
Who approved so the easement's already been granted, correct?
I don't, that's a question for the applicant. You mean the construction easement? The Scott Bortz, the applicant had indicated they had worked out a construction easement with the pastor. I do. And I apologize.
Oh. Okay.
I'm not sure if John Russell knows about construction easement.
Is that a yes or no? Okay. All right. But it was signed. Okay. When the property was, and this is to Shelley and or Adrian, when the property was rezoned in 2019, and then there was an amendment to the rezoning. Was it earlier this year in 2021, or was it? Okay. So as we all well know, when there's a rezoning, you need to send notice to adjacent property owners. And I'm assuming that the church would have been an adjacent property owner. Would they have been sent those notices as part of that process?
Yes, I double-checked the mail-out sheets, the notification sheets, and we sent.
Well, I think we can't hear.
I'll speak louder if that's
All right.
helpful. The answer is yes, they were on the mailing list. I verified it for both public hearings. We sent a notice to the churches both zoning actions. There were also 2 community meetings held required by the applicant. They both were held at the church.
And did, there's been one more question I have. Is the, there's some talk about cutting across a driveway. Is there any encroachment on this current driveway by the realignment? I didn't think that to be the case, but can you clarify that?
I was unclear of that statement earlier when it was stated. The driveway on Acme Road to the church is being built as part of this realignment. The entire realignment is actually on, again, 3 properties, 2 owned by the applicant and the 1 owned by the city. So as far as I'm aware, there is no physical encroachment unless they're speaking to the worked out construction easement, and that isn't intended to be permanent.
Okay.
Shelley, can you bring up the picture of the driveway coming out of the new development to where it aligns with the oaks?
So you may recall when this project was originally approved, it was actually approved with 3 access points on Woodlawn. There's one to the east, there was one in the center, and then there was this other one that aligned with the Oaks Parkway.
All right, let me ask you a question. And I'm sorry, kind of visual, help everybody here. So Acme Road is somewhere right now, more or less right in this vicinity. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say pretty close.
Pretty close, okay. And you know what I was saying is, why don't we just move Acme Road over so it aligns with the Oaks Office Park, which would seem to make sense. It made enough sense to them to where they have done that. They have probably done that because with the volume of traffic that's going to be generated here with the Oaks, this will become a signalized intersection at some point to control all of this truck traffic, in my opinion. The public purpose, I mean, you've got to move the road, so we're moving the road over here while they are moving their driveway to line up here. I mean, to me, the better public purpose would have been a signalized public road right here. I mean, I think someone said there's a possibility of signalizing it here. I mean, if I'm betting, that's where your signal's going to be. I'm betting they know that at some point. Now, you're talking about serving a public purpose. Acme Road, controlled by a traffic signal at this point, gives you a 4-way intersection that, even with the sight lines, controls the traffic and slows the traffic. I mean, that's looking at this. That's what I see.
Does that have anything to do with what we're deciding tonight?
No.
Okay.
Again,
I'm trying to stay focused.
Alignment has no bearing on tonight's.
We're not talking about alignment.
No.
We're talking about closing.
Road closure. Alignment has already been decided and approved by this council.
Okay, well, let's just term that as you just indulged me for just a moment, just to make a point. Whether it has any bearing or changes the matter at hand, I just wanted to express that. So there you have it.
And since we are having discussion, I went to the site. I did not respond, but I did go and look. So I don't think any of us here going to do anything to make anything in North Belmont more difficult. We thought, and as the pastor indicated, this is a good economic situation for the community. So, if, you know, I think the unfortunate part, and I think maybe that's, I'm not going to speak for you, Mark, is that we're trying to do something good, and it seems like that there's some issues that people think we're not paying attention to North Belmont, when in reality we were trying to pay a lot of attention and make sure that we do have it develop into something that people have those jobs and people want to come to that community more than even they do at this point. So that, I just wanted to make sure that I made that clear. I'm very concerned about it, and I did go there.
Well, just for the record, I'd like to add that I visited the site as well the day of our previous council meeting.
I lived in Belmont. I lived on Casey Street, 305 back then. And it was a great place to live back then. There's great people who live over there. But at the same time, are we gonna provide a buffer and a nest for these people to be safe as far as the church goes?
Just to clarify, you're asking staff about that. The applicant is working with the church to create a landscape buffer and address their concerns.
Yeah, you gotta have a buffer there.
Yes, to try to do a landscape buffer. Again, this is a procedure in which, and the attorney will have to clarify, there's my understanding we cannot put conditions on this action. This isn't a conditional zoning, and this is a different type of project, but again, my understanding is I have a email from the applicant's team saying, I'll be glad to read it in the record, they will continue to work with the church to try to address their concerns as much as feasible and continue to work with them on the design of some type of landscape buffer to help address.
And perhaps maintenance too.
It does not say anything about maintenance. But
Well, I
we
was
can
just saying
convey
maybe
that.
perhaps that's something that they could also
Yes.
agree to.
If
Yes.
that's the direction you're providing.
Right, obviously that's not going to be a condition, but that was
Right.
just a thought.
Right.
So,
Question for John Russell. What's the owner's appetite for changing the conditional zoning or alignment?
They can't do that. So there are a couple reasons this trip. Part of it is space limitation. So given where Acme's going to go, there's city wants a new water line that's going to be going in there. There's utility easements, there's sidewalks, there's a planning buffer. Then you've got your conditional zoning buffering on the east side between the road and the building. And there's the workable water tower issue. So there's just not space to move. And then you also have, there's also an economic driver to this project. Bottom line, it's a commercial project. It needs to be economically successful, and that every time you go in and re-engineer and redo it adds additional costs. So, as there's over $400,000 that's been spent on the construction, on the permitting, on the removal of Jade and Centerview that have already been approved. So there's a significant amount of money that's been expended, and there's just not room for both from a physical standpoint and a budgetary standpoint to accommodate realignment other than where it is and what it's been approved and worked on.
Any other questions? No.
Motion to come out of public hearing.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Okay. That moves us to the next item on the agenda. Consider an ordinance to permanently close a portion of Acme Road to accommodate the realignment.
well, before I make the motion, or anyone makes a motion, I think we need to be cognizant of what the attorney has advised us and what's being considered and what the relevant considerations are. Those being that it's not contrary to the public interest, i.e. it serves a public purpose, and two, that no individual owning property in the vicinity of the street would thereby be deprived of ingress or egress to their property. And those are the findings we have to make. That's what's being asked of us. There's a lot of other things that we've heard tonight that I know are very important to people in this room, that, we've heard from staff that say the applicant is willing to continue working with the church to address some of those concerns. But at the end of the day, this is not considering realignment. That's been approved as part of a site plan, as part of a rezoning on 2 separate occasions that went through the process. And everything that I've heard about that process is that it was appropriate and complied with all requirements for notice, et cetera. That has been decided. Those rights are now vested, and there are repercussions to the city should we interfere with those vested rights. And so as unfortunate as this is, and I hope that these concerns can continue to be addressed and that the applicant will strive to be a good neighbor and work with the church based on the narrow inquiry that we're being asked to make, I would think that the applicant has met its burden of showing what it needs to show in terms of the abandonment of the road. I will move that we approve the ordinance withdrawing from dedication a portion of Acme Road pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 160A 299.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second, but I also want to make sure that we talk about the done deal part. The done deal part is what I think there's concern at Goshen Presbyterian that we have already. Could I finish? Could I finish what I was saying? Okay, and that alignment was already approved. What we're now doing is closing the road, whether you want it somewhere else or whichever place. That's not what we're looking at, so I will second the motion.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Opposed.
Okay. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing for the Imperial Lofts, a request to rezone 0.45 acres site from neighborhood center commercial to a conditional district.
Can you guys hear me? There we go. This is case ZA2021.01 for Imperial Lofts. The request before you tonight is to rezone.
Yeah, excuse me, I'm sorry. I'd like to move to go into public hearing.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, are you making the motion?
I did.
I'll second.
Richard second.
Okay, sorry.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, sorry.
No, I apologize. I was getting a jump start. Sorry about that.
We appreciate your enthusiasm.
As previously shared, the request before you tonight is to rezone a 0.45 acre parcel from its existing zoning of neighborhood center commercial to neighborhood center commercial conditional district for the purpose of accommodating a 13,800 square foot, 3-story mixed-use building, which is proposed to be comprised of 9 split-level residential units and up to 7 commercial suites. The applicant is seeking relief in the areas of open space and parking lot perimeter landscape buffer. The proposed development is on parcel ID 126708. The applicant is Imperial Lofts, LLC, and the representatives are Andy Mercer from Finial Construction and Eric Vargasco with Lennox Development Group. The slide before you is just to represent the project's location along South Main Street and to put some project context in as we get started here. So the image to the top is the Masonic Lodge, which is located adjacent to the subject parcel to the north, and the Oak Ridge Dental office, which is located adjacent to the project to the south. This site is as you can see through the image here on the left, I don't know if you can actually see the topography on the slide, so I apologize if that's not showing up. But the site has been previously developed. It was formerly a car wash. It's currently vacant, however, and so that's the imagery that you're seeing on the slide. The site is mainly covered by impervious surface, both asphalt and concrete, with minimal topographic variability across the site, although there is a slight slope towards the rear of the property. The ground elevation at the rear lot line is approximately 10 feet higher than the elevation at the rear facade of the residential homes along Bryant Street. And there are 2 overhead electric lines currently crossing the site that the developer is planning to relocate as a part of this project. There's currently no sidewalk abutting the property on either side. However, the developer is proposing sidewalk directly adjacent and in front of the proposed development. As you can see on the screen, the proposed site plan is, again, for one structure, in total about 13,800 square feet, with the first floor reserved primarily for commercial, up to 7 individual commercial suites, which would be about 3,884 square feet on the lower floor. The second and third floors would be reserved for residential units, so those would be 2-level residential units, 7 2-bedroom and 2 1-bedroom units, comprised in a shopfront building form on the site. The site plan also reserves 26 parking spaces on site to service those uses. In staff's analysis, again, the existing zoning of the subject parcel is neighborhood center commercial. And as you can see to the image to the right, the area in pink on that map are all of the adjacent properties that are also zoned neighborhood center commercial around the subject property. The yellow areas are general residential zoning designations. Nearby uses to the site include single-family residential, primarily to the rear, as well as civic, commercial, and office uses along South Main Street and nearby. As you can see here, this is a chart of the ordinance parameters that would be required for neighborhood center commercial and for storefront buildings within our land development code. And the subject development meets all of those requirements with the exception of 2 where they're seeking relief. And that is, again, in the area of open space and in the parking lot perimeter landscape buffer. And we'll go over those in more detail later on in the presentation. As a part of this project, the developer did perform a tree inventory as required with our newly updated tree ordinance. And that tree inventory revealed that there are 2 significant elm trees located on the property line at that location. However, because they are directly on the property line, our ordinance says that if more than 30% of the critical root zone is located off of that subject property, they can't count those as tree safe. So even though the developer is proposing to keep these trees and let them remain on the site, they are proposing to fulfill their tree safe requirements utilizing new tree plantings, which is allowable within our ordinance and fully compliant. And in order to do that, the proposed development plans to provide 6 small trees on the subject site, 2 medium-sized trees, and 1 large tree, for a total tree save credit area of 6,600 square feet. Our ordinance currently requires that 5% of the site for commercial developments in NCC be reserved as tree save credit area, which would equate to 988 square feet. And so the proposed development meets that and exceeds that, providing 600% plus or minus of the requirement. In addition to the tree save area provided on the site and in the chart above, they are also planting 2 new street trees in between the new sidewalk and the roadway. In the area of open space, the proposed development is providing 2,575 square feet, or 13% of their site as open space, noted on the plan image to the left. The total area of their site is 19,776 square feet, but the ordinance requirement currently reads that for the proposed project, 6,960 square feet of open space would be required, which would equate to roughly 35% of the site as open space. Our ordinance does allow for open space requirements to be met via two options, both on-site or payment in lieu. The developer is requesting relief in this area for the remaining open space not provided on-site, which equates to about 4,385 square feet. Staff evaluated this, and to be honest, we struggled a little bit, so I'll go in a little bit of detail about this. We support this request for relief, but the reason for the struggle is because of some of the discrepancies that were discovered in our current ordinances when we were doing our staff analysis. The reason that we are supporting this ultimately is because the proposed project is 400 feet from Stowe Park, which is only a 3-minute walk from open space. And in looking at some of the history and intent behind our current ordinances, we felt like this is a reasonable request. So to get into that a little bit further, the inconsistencies that we noted in comparing the NCC Neighborhood Center commercial area with our downtown district are in the areas of parking and open space. Both of these districts are designated for our downtown area. But as you can see from the chart to the left, the parking ratios are not consistent. So in NCC, the developer would be required to provide 1 parking space per 400 square feet, and the proposed development meets that requirement. But in that zone, there is a requirement for open space that's based on proximity to a park as well as density of the site. The downtown district zoning requires a slightly higher parking ratio of 1 space per 250 to 300 square feet for office and retail uses, which would require them to provide 32 spaces on site, but it exempts open space requirements. And so staff analyzed this and looked at the balance to try to figure out what would be the best recommendation for this site. A little bit of the history on this project is initially when it was conceptualized, the project was proposing 23 parking spaces on site. At the time of initial ideas and conceptualizations about this, the development was located within 300 foot of the public parking lot that was located on Myrtle Street. In June 2020, the city sold a portion of this lot that had the frontage along South Main Street, meaning that the development could no longer count any of those public parking spaces towards their parking requirements on the site. So when they came to officially file a sketch plan application with us, we reviewed the options as presented here tonight on the chart to the applicant and asked them to look at what can be done to increase parking on the parcel. The applicant was able to update their site plans to include the 26 spaces as required with NCC so that no parking relief needed to be requested in this zone, and also willingly reached out to the church across the street to see if additional parking could be utilized through a shared parking arrangement. Ultimately, because we know parking is critical to downtown and important to this city council, staff recommended pursuing conditional zoning under NCC since the development and the team were able to meet the parking that's required for their existing zoning designation of NCC. And we felt like in reviewing the requirements, because the ordinance currently exempts open space within downtown district in order to encourage residential development in that area, we felt that it would be consistent to also support the relief requested in this location as well. At one time, looking at the history of how our ordinances developed, there was interest in actually rezoning all of the NCC properties in downtown to downtown district, but that ultimately was not supported by the property owners, from my understanding. And so there was some inconsistencies between what the original vision was in staff's interpretation for that area and for the ultimate zoning designation when the land development code was written and what ultimately came to be. And so after evaluating that and exploring that, we ultimately did support the request for relief in open space and guided the applicant to submit under the NCC zoning designation as they currently are, but through the conditional zoning process per some of the changes that were supported by City Council. We're currently, after revealing these inconsistencies as staff, looking at our ordinances right now in the areas of open space and parking, especially in those downtown areas, in order to make sure that we can try to clean up some of these inconsistencies, as well as look at what we can do in the future towards more urban open space forms within our downtown. So, sorry, that was a little bit of a sidetrack, but I'm trying to give you some of the backstory as to why staff supported and has guided the applicant to submit the way that they did. All right, so that being said, they are asking for relief in open space, but to support some of what I just talked about before, the subject site is within a 5-minute range of Stowe Park, which is 6.5 acres of public common open space, as well as downtown businesses that promote social gathering, and is in a 5-minute or less proximity to public parking as well. And so the map to the left there is a 5-minute walkability radius from the subject site. Okay. In addition to that 5-minute walking radius, this subject site is connected to downtown by being a part of the National Register Belmont Historic District boundary, as shown to the image on the far left, and is just 2 parcels south of the Main Street's historic downtown area currently, although it's my understanding that the Main Street group is looking at possibly expanding that boundary in the future, which may include the subject parcel. As such, the development as proposed provides complementary architecture to the historic fabric of our downtown area and provides bike racks on site for cycling connectivity to all of the amenities that downtown has to offer. It is also providing an 8.5-foot wide sidewalk along its street frontage that, while there's no current connectivity at this time, would provide a future opportunity if the city would like to pursue that to connect into the remaining sidewalk infrastructure closer to Stowe Park. In the area of parking, as shared previously, the development was able to fully fulfill the parking as required in their existing zoning of NCC by providing 26 spaces on site as required. We did also look at on-street parking along Main Street. However, this location isn't ideal for that, and NCDOT nor the fire department supported on-street parking as it may limit access and because of the curvation of the road at that location. If there was ever demand for parking and above and beyond what is provided on site for this development, the proposed site is located about 450 feet away still from the Myrtle Street parking lot, which is public parking, which is about a 3-minute walk, in addition to all the on-street parking along Main Street, and about 900 feet or a 4-minute walk from the Mill Street public parking lot. In the area of parking perimeter landscape buffer, again, the applicant is seeking relief in this area, in select areas. The ordinance currently requires a 10-foot minimum landscape buffer around the perimeter of the parking lot with the intent to screen vehicular lighting from the adjacent uses. While they're able to meet this in some areas, they prioritized fitting the required parking on the site, and so they are seeking relief on the northeast side, closest to the Masonic Lodge, in the area highlighted here, along the rear lot line, in the area highlighted as there, and then next to the dentist office in the areas highlighted here. In the area on the northeast side next to the Masonic Lodge, there is about a foot buffer between the edge of the property line and the proposed parking lot. In the rear, the distance varies as there's an angled approach. So it goes down from the 10-foot closest to the narrowest point being around 3 foot as currently proposed. And then next to the dentist office, it again is angled, so it varies between that 10-foot buffer and then down to a point. Quickly reviewing transportation on the site, the proposed project falls below the TIA's threshold, so no TIA study was required for this property. The site is proposed to be accessed via South Main Street, as you can see on the site plan located to the right, and to the image directly below that bullet point. And the entrance actually goes underneath the building, and they're providing a clearance area of 13 foot 6 inches for those vehicles to access the rear of the site, which you can see on the front elevation shown on the screen. The front elevation also shows the commercial area is proposed that would be accessible from the street along the public sidewalk being installed, as well as the residential units located above and their balconies. The entrances to the residential units would actually be located along the rear elevation, viewable only from the parking lot. And so, as you can see on the third floor, there's a walkway that's accessed via either the stairwell or the elevator shaft. So residents would have two options to be able to access their front door. The front doors of these units are located on the third floor, and again, they are two-story units. But those doors are not visible from South Main Street. The South Main Street doors would be solely reserved for commercial business usage.
Where's the elevator shaft? Is that it right here?
That is correct. So it is the slightly taller portion. I wish I had a laser pointer. I apologize. That's the tower
Right.
on the screen.
And there's no access to any of the apartments from the second floor. They're all from the third floor. Is that correct?
That is correct.
But they're 2 stories. You just access them on the third floor, and then you'd have like another floor downstairs.
Right, so I would let the applicant answer the specifics, but it's my understanding, right, that you would just go in on the third floor and access the second level via stairs. So just as somebody would go in the front door and normally travel up, in this case, they would travel down. Staff also evaluated this project in relation to consistency with the comprehensive land use plan. The image to the right shows the Center City Small Area Plan, and the star on that plan locates the project's location in relation to the proposed uses of that small area plan. So this project is located within the Center City core area and is consistent with the community form principles in that area, in that it is a building that contains more than 2 uses. It prioritizes pedestrians over cars by offering the commercial at street level. The parking is located off-street and to the rear. Street trees are provided on the property. The maximum height is consistent with the 3-floor maximum, as noted in our comprehensive land use plan. And the proposed materials and styling are consistent with the existing surrounding structures. It is also consistent with the land use principles within that Center City core area as well. In evaluating the project's consistency with the overall goals of the comprehensive land use plan, we found that this project is consistent in the areas of land use, and that it provides a balanced approach to land use that encourages a healthy tax base and a mix of uses that will promote a choice in housing, shopping, and services. In the area of economy, and that it fosters a vibrant economy that balances both residential growth and employment and commerce, as well as community character, and that it enhances the character of Belmont by building on our heritage, improving the community appearance, and promoting social and economic diversity. As moving forward, the developer did hold 2 required neighborhood meetings, one on site and one via Zoom or virtually. and in total had about 5 attendees between both of these events. The comments provided or received during the community meeting were focused around the architectural and/or specific unit details, the parking on site, as well as pedestrian safety. This project was presented to the Planning Board on July 15th and did receive one public comment from a representative at Oak Ridge Dental, raising some concerns about the side setbacks. However, the project as proposed complies with the side setback requirements in our ordinance. Planning Board discussed this project at length and ultimately reviewed the requested areas of relief, supporting relief requested for the parking lot perimeter landscape buffer, but noting that they would like a condition to be added to install a 4-foot tall opaque fence at the area of relief requested, specifically at the rear of the property, and suggested that the developer maximize the amount of compact spaces in that same area in order to increase a landscape buffer where relief was needed. The Planning Board did not support the requested relief in open space and instead supported a combination of on-site and payment in lieu to fulfill the ordinance requirements in that area. But they recognized as well that that would be subject to the discretion of City Council, as all payments in lieu must come before you for consideration. A motion was made and supported 7-0 with a unanimous recommendation of approval with the modifications noted above. So in summary, the applicant is requesting to rezone from Neighborhood Center Commercial to Neighborhood Center Commercial Conditional District to allow for the development of a 13,800 square foot mixed-use building that will be 3 stories, requesting again relief in the areas of open space as well as parking lot perimeter landscape buffer in the specific areas noted. Planning Board supported relief in parking perimeter landscape buffer only, with modified conditions to add a fence at the rear of the property line and support for a combination of on-site and payment in lieu to fulfill the open space requirements. And noted that the conditions as proposed, I wanted to note to you that the conditions as proposed in your packet are consistent with the recommendations of the Planning Board. So you would see that there was some change between staff's initial recommendations and Planning Board recommendations. What's before you tonight is consistent with Planning Board's recommendations. Applicant is still seeking relief as originally requested for both of the areas noted above in open space and the parking lot perimeter landscape buffer, and is also seeking your consideration to remove the condition for fencing due to the topographic conditions present on the site, but has shared that they're willing to provide the compact parking as suggested by the Planning Board. So to answer those questions directly and speak for their project tonight, the applicant is ready to present to you as well at the end of my presentation. So with that, I am asking that City Council receive the report with Planning and Zoning's recommendation and any public comments that you'll hear tonight, and then ultimately consider an ordinance to approve as presented, approve as modified, or disapprove this project. As a reminder, 2 findings are also required. One is that the map amendment is a reasonable request and in the public's best interest, and that the map amendment is consistent with the goals of the comprehensive land use plan, again in the area of land use, economy, and community character. And with that, I conclude my presentation.
I have a question, just out of curiosity. The staff indicated that this was complementary architecture. That I don't understand how you arrived at that conclusion.
Sure. So while it is a new building form, the reason that staff noted that we felt it was complementary is because of the use of brick as the primary material, and not just on the front facade, but on all elevations of the proposed project. And on the side elevations, which I apologize are not here, they were harder to read on the slide. They're actually proposing detailing on blocked-in windows that are consistent with the Masonic Lodge directly next door. So that window detailing was specifically designed to match what was adjacent to it. So those were the two primary reasons, was the brick materiality and some of the detailing of the windows. The commercial style windows are also consistent with some of the commercial style windows in downtown, and the residential style windows are consistent with some of those residential uses on upper levels within downtown as well.
Any other questions for Tim?
Yeah, what's compact parking?
Sure, so a compact parking space is just not quite as deep. So a normal space would be 9 foot wide by 18 feet deep. I believe what the developer is proposing would be to continue the 9 foot width, but to shorten that to 16 feet in order to gain an additional 2 feet of landscaping consistent with planning.
Does a fence contribute to the ability to have compact parking?
Those would
What's
be,
the point?
from my understanding, planning board felt that the fence may help to provide some additional buffer where the 10 foot width was not possible on the site, but the two are independent of one another. The installation of the fence doesn't hinder nor support compact parking.
I believe there might have been some concern about screening from the residences behind the site in terms of the fencing, that there's like I think the residences, what, on Bryant Street behind the property are 10 feet lower than this property, and I think the planning board was concerned about lights or various things impacting the properties behind this one.
So the fence was one item, and then the compact parking
I
was
believe
the
that's
second.
right. Well, they how did this work? And correct me if I'm wrong. They encouraged the compact parking at the rear so that there could be more of a buffer than might otherwise be. Plus, they wanted the fence, so we can talk about that.
So could you fit a non-compact car in this compact parking?
That's never recommended, to park a non-compact car in a compact space, just because the rear end of the car may overhang the drive aisle. But
well,
for
you're
parking
obviously
space,
never parked in the Wake Forest Corporate Center parking garage in Charlotte, but sorry.
Well, that was my concern, was that
right.
what I've always seen happen is that you have somebody double park.
Yes.
And then
So our ordinance does allow for the utilization of compact parking on site, and by providing 4 spaces, that would be consistent with what's allowable in our ordinance. By utilizing more than 4 spaces, it would be out of compliance. It would need to seek relief, but they can provide up to 4 and still remain in compliance with our ordinances as it relates to parking lot design. All the rest would need to be full-size spaces.
so we're talking about 4 compact?
It would be
spaces?
4, would be the maximum there. And to note, the plans that were shown tonight in your packet and on the screen are showing full-size spaces, so it's not that they can't fit them on the site, it's that planning board was asking them to reduce those spaces to a compact size in order to allow for slightly more landscaping.
I believe that the original plan had 4 compact spaces throughout the property, and the recommendation was to put them all against the rear line so that the buffer there'd be more room for the buffer. Am I misremembering?
I don't think there was actually, but they've debated it during trying to get everything on the site. I'll let the architect and applicant speak directly to that, but it's my understanding that there were not already 4 on the site, but it was just, they were all full site, but that they could, they could. But I could be mistaken, so I'll let them speak.
What was the payment in lieu that the planning board recommended?
So the calculation per our ordinance, one second, let me get that. So our ordinance calculation is based on a number for density as well as adjacency to parks. So because this project is not directly adjacent to a park, it would fall under the category of the half-mile calculation. That calculation per our ordinance equates to $31,839. $31,839.
And if we were to assess that perhaps this is a more appropriate question for the city manager, but what would be done with the $31,839 that we were to collect this payment?
So that would be used either to purchase additional property somewhere in the city, presumably in a nearby area, for open space, or to enhance existing public open space.
And just one more thing. You talked a little bit about the downtown district and intent. However, there's only been one property designated downtown district, and that was done just within the last 2 or 3 years. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes. So looking at the history and speaking with Alec in our office, who's been here through the history of some of those ordinance updates, it's my understanding that there were previous attempts to consider rezoning more properties to downtown district, but successfully only one has been done, and that was at the time of redevelopment.
Correct.
Which property is that?
Chronicle Mill.
Chronicle.
And so, I mean, I don't know how one gleans, and I mean, I understand Alec's been here for a long time, but how one gleans intent, it just seems easier to see what the code actually says than what intent might actually have been that was never carried out. As the great Supreme Court Justice Scalia has cast doubt on legislative intent, I'm not so sure about gleaning the intent behind some of these provisions based on what is actually before us in the printed word.
Right, and so that is, we can present what we believe to be the case, but to your point, I wasn't here during the writing, and I didn't do that myself. In that open space chapter, it does say that specifically downtown district is exempt from open space requirement with the intent to encourage residential development in that location. But as shared previously, only one project has been zoned downtown district, and that's why staff believes there must have been some greater purpose of writing that language into the ordinance other than just that one property that wasn't zoned downtown district yet at the time of its adoption.
Well, maybe I'm misunderstanding the slides, but it looks like if you were to go with a downtown district for this property, the parking requirement would go up, right?
That is correct. So that is one of the inconsistencies that we noted when we were doing our analysis that was revealed as part of that process, and we're looking at studying that more in depth to resolve those inconsistencies now that it was discussed.
So it's either they go NCC CD and get they have open space issues, or they go downtown district and they have parking issues.
That's correct.
Yes.
Well, I don't know that a $31,000 payment in lieu is really excessive. I mean, that seems reasonable, and it seems like a pretty good case for payment in lieu, in my opinion.
It would be silly to have any more open space on the site itself.
Yeah.
So I think contributing to a larger pool
Yeah.
makes more sense as well.
Anybody have any other questions for Tiffany? We have one person signed up to speak. Public comment. Jennifer Brown.
Yes, that is, Jennifer Brown is with the applicants team, and she would love to present to you tonight.
Excellent.
Trying to get to your slides. Thank you. Just state my address as well. Jennifer Brown with Novus Architects, 1204 South Point Road in Belmont. Good evening. We are here today presenting Imperial Lofts located right here on South Main Street, nestled between the Masonic Hall and Oak Ridge Dentistry. We are excited to bring this project into downtown as an extension of the Main Street retail corridor, bringing new business and revenue opportunities with 7 commercial retail units at the street level and 9 two-story condos above, overlooking Stowe Park and Main Street. There has been significant interest from local residents in the real estate opportunity presented before you. And at this time, we are pleased to say that all of the units have been reserved. As a Belmont resident, a member of the Main Street Design Committee, and a former participant on the Main Street Design Guidelines Committee, I personally have strived to design a building that fits into the historic urban fabric of our downtown. incorporating streetscape, storefronts, materiality, and architectural cues that pay homage to this town's vibrant history as an innovative mill town. Imperial Lofts LLC is a partnership between Finial Construction, a local contractor and business owner on Main Street here in Belmont, and Lennox Development Group from the neighboring town of Creamerton. As a local team with roots in Belmont and Gaston County, we are excited to bring these development opportunities into this community, introducing high-end living with the added bonus of proximity and walkability to Belmont's greatest amenities downtown. The residents of these 1 and 2 bedroom condos will take an elevator to the 3rd floor in these open concept loft-style units with high ceilings, large windows, and generous balconies on the front of the building with panoramic views of downtown. The prospective buyers for both the commercial and residential units are excited for the opportunity to live and work downtown Belmont with direct access to restaurants, shops, Stowe Park, and Main Street festivities with a front row seat to Friday Night Live concert series. We have designed this building and positioned on site with the future residents' needs at the forefront to offer a downtown living experience new to Belmont and Gaston County. We have worked diligently with the planning department and the civil engineer to provide the required on-site parking for both commercial and residential units. And with any compact site with maximized density comes challenges such as open space and buffer requirements that we have faced here. With Main Street literally positioned at our front door, we are asking council to support our request for relief in these 2 areas. We are confident that this addition to downtown will bring new business opportunities, revenue, and vitality as an extension of Main Street, and giving both residents and visitors the opportunity to take advantage of the downtown amenities.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
I noticed that this is a rendering.
Yes.
We've had issues in the past with renderings. This is the rendering, and then later on, this is the final product. The
Sure.
2 don't always seem to sync up. Is this what we're going to get?
This is what you're going to get.
Okay.
Have worked on this through design for over a year. We were nearly finalized back in August of last year, and went through a pricing exercise and made some changes that improved the building front. But this is we are actually coming to you late in the game with some of the changes that has happened. We're later than we probably should have been in some aspects, but this is what you're going to get. This is what we're happy with.
All right, I'm not sure I understand the green space requirements and the payment in lieu. Are you seeking relief from the green space completely?
So we are on site providing a fraction of the required. I think based on the calculations, we have 13% of the required. We are seeking relief for the remainder of that requirement. So the remainder being the 4,385 square feet and or payment in lieu is where we're seeking relief.
I know the planning board wanted to put in a fence at the rear, and you all say there's some topographic issues with that. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, should I? Yes, we did conduct a study after that planning board meeting, studying the cross section of the site in relation to the residential homes on Bryant Street. And so the 2 biggest factors to consider here, or well, 3, is the elevation change from the parking lot to the actual homes. There is, from the parking lot level to the floor level of these homes is approximately 11.5 feet. They're 1-story homes, and so as you can see, there's a dash line that comes across, and so that shows it's actually at the roof line of the house. In addition to that, all of the homes on Bryant Street are 75 to 80 feet from the property line. Along the property line, there was a previous easement that has since been abandoned And so that section of lot is currently filled with trees and underbrush on both sides of the property line. Ours will be replaced with landscaping, but we presume that underbrush will remain on the other side.
And to go back to the fence then?
And so related to the fence is a 4-foot fence is no taller than the brush and landscaping that we would be providing. We would like to address the compact parking with 4, which is based on the 15% maximum allowance by the ordinance. And so that will increase our landscape buffer at the most stringent point to be a 5-foot buffer. And so we believe that they sort of counteract each other, making the fence just a maintenance and not necessarily necessary.
I'll make a motion, we come out of public hearing.
Second. Got a second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. So that brings us to the next page. Consider the adoption of an ordinance approving Imperial Lofts and a request to rezone 0.45 acre site from neighborhood commercial to a neighborhood center commercial conditional district.
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Well, so I was just going to ask, where are we collectively on some of these questions before us? I have not been the biggest fan of payment in lieu in the past. I think it's been problematic in some cases. I'm open to it in this because this is something of a different setting. That said, I think it's incumbent on us to make sure that the houses on the back are protected from the light, the cars, whatever. I don't know if that means additional buffering. I don't know if that means the fence. Those are 2 questions that I have that I need to resolve.
First of all, don't let me forget, if we decide to adopt the ordinance, there's one change that needs to be made, material that we'll get to, but I agree. I don't see the need to require all of the open space here in terms of like the actual open space, but I don't see why we shouldn't ask for the payment in lieu. So the draft ordinance, as staff has written it, has that condition as requested by the planning board, which is the payment in lieu, so not to grant the relief from the open space requirement. I see some confusion.
No.
Okay. So we're not granting, we would not be granting relief from the open space requirement, but we would say, instead of requiring the 4,800 additional square feet, we're fine with giving a payment in lieu. And it sounds like, I mean, you all can chime in. I don't think any of us, the planning board was, thinking along the lines of why should this be any different than any other project where we'd have those requirements or the payment in lieu, and I'm tending to agree, so I'm not averse to the payment in lieu in this situation. I think, as Ryan was suggesting, it might be impractical to have all of that required open space on this lot with this project in mind, but I certainly don't think the payment in lieu would be that onerous. I'm fine with the perimeter, parking perimeter, like those, I guess, pinch points, if you will. I'm fine with that. And I'm fine with not requiring the fence. That's just me.
I think this is a scenario for why payment in lieu exists, but for a place where it doesn't make sense to have the green space. And so I think taking the payment makes sense here and applying it to other green space in the community. The fence, I prefer natural barriers versus fencing. I I think most people kind of want that. That doesn't make sense. But I prefer natural fencing. So if we could do large evergreens or something that provides a nice buffer without putting a metal fence or a wooden fence, I think that would make it look better. So, and as far as the parking goes, I would leave that up to, as long as they meet requirements, leave it up to the developer and staff as far as what fits best. I don't have a compact car. Maybe they'll have the charging station. Or a golf cart. All those are popular now.
If we're going with the buffer, I think we need to specify it has to be a minimum of 4 feet or 6 feet, because I look at what we've run into in several other situations and we didn't get what was agreed to. So I think, because you don't want the car lights from the parking lot to be shining over your house.
So do you
So
want to say
that,
4
I
or
think,
6?
yeah,
And
4
you
to
don't-
6 feet minimum.
You don't want to require plants where they are immature plants and the beams of the headlights shoot right over the top of them. I think is
For 5 years.
for for an indeterminate time. You want reasonably mature plants that achieve the goal immediately. You know, I'm not going to support the payment in lieu because I think it makes sense in this case, because this is mixed use. This is still a residence. It's not strictly commercial. I mean, the reason I would support payment in lieu in this case and not require it is the proximity to the park. If it were anywhere else, I might not support that because, I mean, it is still a residence. It's mixed use. And the open space is for the residents.
Sounds like we're in pretty good agreement.
Do we need to specify, like, as far as the actual landscape buffer goes, I think the evergreen aspect is important since we're trying to make sure that headlights aren't shining into people's bedrooms. Do we need to specify that, or is that already a requirement somewhere?
I think we need to specify. These need to be mature plants. I mean, you can take a 10-gallon plant and one, that is like this tall. Once it's in the ground, it's half the size.
She's not here.
So it looks like condition of approval 3 is what we're talking about here, because the current condition of approval says the development shall provide a minimum 4-foot tall opaque fence along the rear property abutting residential uses within the requested area. We could change that to the development shall provide a minimum 4-foot tall, 4-foot natural evergreen buffer along the rear property line abutting residential uses.
Above ground, not including the root ball.
Staff would suggest that you specify how tall it should be at planting. The ordinance currently defines that buffer requirement at a 4-foot height, but what it is at the time of planting, if this is a concern, maybe something that could be clarified.
So
mature plants.
4 foot at planting, evergreen buffer, is that?
4
Now, is that, or am I doing something?
4
No,
feet.
you take good notes. That's good.
4 foot at grade, meaning surface. 4 foot from surface up.
Yeah. Is that, I mean, I'm not on.
And we can consult with Susan on.
If you
the
talk
right
about a
variety.
4-foot plant, you're not including the
The root ball.
container.
Oh,
Yeah, that's why I say at grade. It's got to be 4 feet at grade.
yeah. All right. All right. Well, I think we've got some consensus. I think you're not on the fence about the fence anymore, Richard, are you?
No, I was either or, but it's got to be something that's going to provide the buffering immediately.
Yes. All right. Well, then, how about this? I will make a motion to approve the rezoning ordinance with the following modifications. In the second whereas clause, to modify that sentence so it's whereas Imperial Lofts LLC applicant, the property owner of record, and the city of Belmont submitted an application, because as it reads now, it makes it sound like the city of Belmont is the property owner, and that's not correct. So I would make that modification, and I will modify proposed condition of approval 3 to read that the development shall provide a minimum 4-foot tall at planting above ground natural evergreen buffer along the rear property abutting residential uses within the requested area of parking lot perimeter.
Okay, and so you're including the payment in lieu of green space
The
in there
payment
too?
in
We got
lieu is
that?
already in
Okay,
condition
so we're
2.
good
Is
with
that,
that. All right.
can you verify that, Parks? I just want to make sure that if it needs to be in the motion, I want to so state.
I think it needs to be in the motion.
All right,
Yeah,
along
also
with, and consistent with condition 2, payment in lieu at the amount calculated at $31,839 pursuant to the appropriate formula.
I'll second that.
Got a motion and a second.
Is
All in
there,
favor, say aye.
hold on.
I just wanted to say that since that's different than what the applicant has provided as a response, I didn't know if city council wanted to check with the applicant on their
Oh.
agreeableness to that condition as a portion of the rezoning.
All right. Applicant?
How you doing? Andy Mercer with Finial Construction. I would like to at least ask if the city council would consider making a compromise, and I think there's a calculation for the park being adjacent. It's a slightly different calculation, and I think it's about half the fee. And the reason we ask this is because everybody's talking about rising in construction costs and things like that. We've one of the things that we've done, we've spent the last going on year, almost a year, it'll be this August, just going through pricing, making design changes and things like that, just to get the project to where it's feasible. We tried to, you know, Richard, you're asking, is this really what we're going to get? This is really what we're going to get. We want to blow this project out of the water. We don't want to come in and do, you know, changing materials and do something halfway and make it look cheap. We want to build something that looks really nice in Belmont, and to do that, it costs money. What Belmont sales prices are supporting right now versus what we're building, our window is really, really small. So any help that we can get would be greatly appreciated to be able to make this project go forward. Do you want to, you have that calculation, do you want to?
So related to the request for potential lesser amount on the payment in lieu for consideration. So the way that the ordinance is written is there's 3 different ways that the open space is calculated. One is if you are over half a mile from a park, which has the maximum requirement. One is if you are within a half a mile, and one is if you are directly adjacent to a park. Well, it says adjacent to a park. It's not defined. We had all of the calculations done thus far were based on half a mile to a park. As we've already stated, we're 3 minutes from the park. We're less than 400 square feet or 400 feet to get to Stowe Park from the front door. And when we do that calculation based on adjacency to a park, that fee is reduced by half. So that fee goes from $31,839 down to $14,994. In addition, or also for consideration, the area requirement is significantly reduced, which is what drives that number. So the area of required open space goes from 69,000 square feet to 6,900 down to 4,600. So there is a significant reduction just for considering it as an adjacent property rather than being a half mile or more from a park.
Parks, I mean, what they're asking us, I mean, we have to define what adjacent mean. I mean, to me, I've also always adjacent meant adjacent.
Does ordinance say adjacent?
Yes.
The ordinance does define the word adjacent, and based on the strict definition within the ordinance itself, it would not qualify as adjacent. However, I believe what the applicant is sharing is that because it is in such close proximity, they're asking for your consideration of an alternative payment of lieu calculation that would allow for staff to calculate that based on the adjacent formula rather than
But they
the
don't
half a
technically
mile.
meet the adjacent formula.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any way you
Right.
can argue this is adjacent to Stowe Park.
Yeah, I will tell you, I'm not amenable to that change if we're also allowing fewer parking spaces, because we've given in
Yeah.
both areas. So if we change that motion, I will not be in favor of it.
To clarify, they're not asking relief in any parking spaces.
Why-
They're
No,
meeting
no,
that
we're talking about the difference in the
Oh.
districts.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's this or this.
Yeah, I mean,
So
the
we're-
whole
we're trying to
argument
work
on
with
this is
both.
premises on the
Yeah.
downtown district, which would require more parking.
Yep.
So
Yes.
my view is, if you don't want to do the open space, do the parking.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes, and I'm assuming you all don't have any issues with the natural buffer vis-a-vis the opaque fence? Okay, that's what.
Absolutely.
That's what we would prefer, because the
Yeah.
fence would not be
Yeah.
aesthetically pleasing.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've made the motion and Martha seconded it, and I mean, as I was constrained by the law in the issue with Acme Road, I feel like I'm constrained by the law in this issue, and if it does not meet the definition of adjacent, then I don't think we can go about changing the definition to suit our purposes. So I would keep the motion in terms of the payment in lieu the way that it is. Now, where does that leave us?
Does the applicant agree with those terms?
Of the motion,
Yes,
so this is where we make the decision on
the payment in lieu of that.
accepting
Yes.
the full 30,000, and there's no avenue for any other possibility?
I'm not hearing any.
Mhm.
I'd accept it.
You would accept it for 31,000? For the full 31,000? Okay, well, we'll accept it, I guess.
Okay, so we have to vote
Continue
now.
with your vote.
All right, well, the motion has been made and seconded.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion carried.
And I would also make a motion that this conditional zoning petition is a reasonable request in the public interest because the use provides access to additional commercial and residential uses within Belmont's Center City core, and the areas of relief are supported by the location's proximity to downtown, site constraints, and that the proposed project is consistent with the comprehensive land use plan and other adopted plans of land use, economy, and community character.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Next item on the agenda, consider the approval of a proposal for civil engineering, design, and survey services for a sidewalk on South Point Road to connect the Smith Farm neighborhood to Stowe Road.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll take a shot at presenting this one. So we have a request to do design services, excuse me, engineering, surveying, and easement acquisition or planning for an easement to build a section of sidewalk on South Point Road. And this comes to you as a follow-up from the Smith Farm rezoning that you addressed this spring and ultimately approved in April. And as you'll recall, the Smith family farm property, and I said April 2020, that should be April 2021. Their property was rezoned, and they will build a sidewalk along their South Point Road frontage, which is approximately 1,025 feet, running from Bellwood Drive north to the northern end of their property. That would provide that sidewalk. Then we have a gap of about 350 feet across two properties, and then you have Stowe Road, and then we have sidewalk along Stowe Road on the east side of South Point Road. So with the construction of the new middle school, there's anticipated additional pedestrian traffic and additional needs for sidewalks in this part of town. The city would then need to fill in that 350-foot wide gap, or 350-foot length gap in the sidewalk along South Point Road. That way we would have a sidewalk from Bellwood Drive all the way into downtown. So, and just to orient everyone, this is the map of the Smith Farm property, which is the large property in the center across the street from the Belmont Middle School. The property in question is in red. That's about the 350 feet of the two parcels just south of Stowe Road. So the Isaacs Group is the engineering firm, design firm, working on the Smith Farm property. We've asked them for a proposal to do the design services for the sidewalk, much in the same way we did with the commercial component of South Point Village across the street, where they were putting in a commercial sidewalk. We wanted to extend it across the private property to close a gap where South Point High School would then build a sidewalk, and we would have a better sidewalk network between the middle school and the high school. This is the same approach that we're requesting that we do for this side of the street that we did for the other side of the street. As you'll recall, the Smith Farm property rezoning, one of the conditions of approval was that the developer would do a payment of $30,000 toward the construction of the sidewalk over those two pieces of property where there would not be any sidewalk and there is no development proposed for sidewalk. So in order for us to construct the sidewalk, we have to design it. We have a proposal from the Isaacs Group, $8,500 to do the design work. And then our goal would be, as the Smith Farm property develops and they build that sidewalk, we would have the plans in place, and that sidewalk would be built. So it would be one long sidewalk on the two parcels outside of the Smith Farm property, as well as all the Smith Farm properties.
Adrian, is there enough right-of-way for us to do that? We would not have to acquire more right-of-way?
We don't know that until we get the actual surveys done. Hopefully there will be enough right-of-way. There is a slope, and so a pretty significant slope on the southern of the two properties. There may need to be some easement for that. So, and if so, we'll certainly negotiate that with the property.
So we have some right-of-way, but we might not have enough.
Correct.
Okay. And I also saw something in the contract about like a retaining wall that might have to be built, and that obviously would add to that, and that we would be responsible for that as well.
Yes.
And Adrian, the other piece of it too, as that goes into the Amity Acres entrance, we still have a problem there with drainage. So when we're looking at the design of this, I want to make sure we include something with regard to drainage, because otherwise you're going to have this sidewalk and it's going to be covered with mud. So if we could just make sure that they look at that, I'm assuming they will, but I want to make it clear that we need to have that addressed at the same time.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do we need to make a motion tonight?
Yes, sir.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Moves us on to the next item. Request from the Historic Society, Belmont Foundation, to partner on house relocation.
While the folks in the Historic Belmont Foundation are coming up to present, just very brief introduction to this item. This came to you via an email from the Historic Belmont Foundation to me with a request for an opportunity to present this to the City Council at this meeting because of the timely nature of construction of the Chronicle Mill property. I gave you the email, I believe, in my weekly report of 2 weeks ago. So this has come up since the last meeting to this meeting. So this is something normally we would have a workshop and we would have a discussion about the process, but because of the timely nature of the request, they're coming to you directly. So with that, I'll turn it over to representatives of the Historic Belmont Foundation.
Hello, and thank you guys for having us. My name is Alex Zooks, and this is April. I keep getting it wrong. But essentially what we're coming to you today is in regards to saving a piece of history, which is part of the Chronicle Mill. Where the Chronicle Mill is, there is a house that is right next to it, which is part of the development where apartments will go into eventually. And essentially, we have exhausted our resources, and it's in this PowerPoint, but just to give a little kind of just a 411 before, of trying to purchase land local to the area to where we could move it just right across the street or adjacent. However, currently the property owners are not interested in selling. So essentially about us, just to give kind of our backstory, we are the Historic Belmont Foundation. We are not associated with the Historical Society of Belmont. We are our own non-for-profit 401c3 non-for-profit that protects and preserves historically significant architecture in and around Belmont, North Carolina. Our vision is to help ensure that Belmont retains its historic character and charm through advocacy and education. Although much of the downtown Belmont is in a designated National Historic District, this designation provides no protection to the individual properties. Our goal is to be a financial and educational resource in the event that any historically significant property becomes endangered or threatened. Historic Belmont Foundation is proud to partner with the Community Foundation of Gaston County in managing a revolving fund for preserving Belmont's history. We also partner with the preservation groups such as the Preservation North Carolina to maintain the fund. And essentially how that works is we have events where the fund is populated to do projects like this, and it's just exclusively just for moving houses and protecting and education. And over the years, the Historic Foundation the Historic Belmont Foundation has been able to secure a good amount of funds to where we could present this to potentially do this project of moving the house. So this is the actual house in question that we would like to relocate. It is at 114 East Catawba Street. Again, it is right next to the Chronicle Mill. If you're looking at the Chronicle Mill, right to the left on the corner. The Historic Belmont Foundation has been approached by John Church about saving the historic mill house at the address listed above, currently being used for the site office for the construction work at the Chronicle Mill development. He has offered to donate the house to us so it can be preserved. The house is in overall good shape. Again, we have reviewed our revolving door fund, which can cover the actual relocation of the house. So what we don't have is the land. Okay. Yeah, so while the mill house again is in question as part of the Belmont National Historic District overlay or inventory last completed in 1996, is not. This house is definitely part of kind of the Chronicle facade of what it was, over 100 years ago when the Chronicle Mill first opened, and residents and mill people that actually worked in the mills lived in these homes. So for us, it's very important to keep this character because that is what Belmont is. I mean, we are founded from our heritage of textiles. The Historic Belmont Foundation would love to save the house and the history associated with the Chronicle Mill and the Belmont's mill heritage. We have contacted other local landowners to find donated or reasonably affordable land, but have had no success. We have had a limited window to find a suitable location for the house before it will be destroyed. And again, we were given kind of a time frame to September. Again, view this, I guess you could say, as our Hail Mary coming to you guys. So how the city can help. We propose a partnership with the city that would help the Historic Belmont Foundation save this important piece of Belmont's textile mill history and architecture. The city owns 302 Brook Street, which is currently it's a community house for Alcohol Anonymous, and it is on a 1.6 acre lot. HBF would like to purchase a piece, not the entire parcel, a piece of this parcel and move the Catawba Street Mill House to this address. And then so as you can see here, this is how the property is currently laid out with the AA house on there. So our proposal is to actually divide the property and purchase the property as you see it to the right, which is currently vacant. Immediately behind that property is actually a downhill slope that goes straight to the train trestle where it's sunken down through Belmont. So there's not much, I guess you could say, of the property that could be utilized up to the front part to that street. And again, that would require clearing on our part. So that would be an additional expense that we would have to factor into actually moving the house, clearing, creating the new foundation, and then eventually putting the house on top of the new foundation. So this is some information that, and again, we have not had an official appraisal done. So this is the information that we received off the Gaston County Development website.com. It's part of the information whenever you go to a parcel and you can see what the value of what Gaston County staff members are, quote unquote, I wouldn't say appraising, but valuing the property at market, or valuing the market of the land. So the market of the actual land we have at 2022 is $63,530, and that's for the entire land piece. Of course, with the building, it adds additional value. What we're looking at is dividing the property itself to where we would come to our proposal of offering potentially, if the city would consider, 31,765 roughly for 0.8 of the acre of the land that the property is, or the house is currently situated on, which is not developed currently. So in summary, we really wanted to, again, this is our Hail Mary, extend kind of our help or our ask to the city council to potentially acquire this land. Again, we understand that there hasn't been much appetite in giving up land or selling land. And that's why, again, we are fully aware to go, or prepared to go through the process if you guys would so allow. And again, keep everything in y'all's court. Again, you know, we could make our bid, you know, it will hit the paper or however it's advertised for, I think it's 30-day period for the upset bid process. And again, at the end of that, you guys would still maintain the power of the control to either accept or decline, and the property could still retain in your possession. But for us, this is, again, kind of a plea from our organization to try to preserve a piece of Belmont's history, which we believe is really intertwined with the historic functions of the mill and what the mill used to be.
So just so you know, I don't know if everybody's familiar how a revolving fund would work for us, but if we were to pursue this, this partnership with you, once we would move the house, then we would put it up for sale. And the sale price would be not for us to make money, but just to replenish our revolving fund. And it would be a reasonable price. We would allow the renovations to be up to the buyer that they wanted to do to the house. But the most important part is we would make sure that we would place historic covenants on it so that it could not be destroyed going forward. So just to let you know, that's what we would intend to happen. This is really about preserving the history of the house and houses like it. And, you know, obviously at the end of it, somebody would be able to purchase a reasonably affordable house in Belmont.
What's the current zoning designation on this property that you want to subdivide and move it to?
I believe that it's, yeah, that's what.
Might want to make sure you can put a residential house there before you move it. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Well, again, this is, you know,
I was about to say, couldn't we do a rezone?
this is something that we were thinking that once this is done, we can make sure that this was
right.
taken care of as well.
And again, that's why we wanted to come to you guys first before spending a lot of money from our organization's fund, just to see if you guys would even be open to the idea. Of course, we are under the understanding that we're not promised the land, and we do get that there is a bid process where you guys could come back off of the bid. But again, we just wanted to get the general understanding if you guys would be open to start this process.
Who decides whether this house is historically significant?
So I did speak to Lucy Pettinger, who is, it's Pettinger, isn't it?
Yes.
Pettinger.
Henniger.
Who is Henniger. Sorry, I'm very bad with name pronunciations, and I don't have the best last name pronunciation either. But we did speak with Lucy, and from a state perspective, it's case by case if the house is moved. But as far as a local designation, again, which the local designation, she did say the organization would work with us in regards to placing those historical, the boundaries, I guess you could say, on the actual house itself. But as far as the importance to it, you know, in the Gaston County Preservation Board, they've come to us multiple times, and I've spoken to them multiple times, is there is a focus to save these types of mill homes. And there's a big interest in it. I mean, a lot of people in my generation specifically love buying these types of homes. It's attractive to them. And there's a lot of character and a lot of potential that can be tied with it as well.
And to more specifically answer the question of whether or not it's historical, it was built within, I think, 10 years of the Chronicle Mill being built, and it was part of that original footprint of Chronicle Mills. So we know that it was associated with the Chronicle Mill property, and the only thing that is, it's not within the overlay of the historic district, as you all know, because we were just talking about Chronicle Mill having kind of its own special district right now. So it's not within that, so it's not, considered, it wasn't inventoried when we did the inventory in 1996. However, given the fact that it is within the original Chronicle Mill footprint, it's over 100 years old, it's definitely distinctively in the style of a mill house, and it's right across from the Chronicle Mill Village area where some existing mill houses still are. Whether or not they've been preserved through the state or something like that, it's not within that zone. So nothing has been presented in that way except in a case-by-case basis, which is what we're talking about for this.
Let me ask about this. So are you saying that you wouldn't be able to repay this? What do you mean by repay the city? So you want to buy the property from the city, but you wouldn't be able to pay for it until you sell the house?
Well, no, that's not necessarily true. This would be like if we were to have to go higher than what we are prepared to go for. We would really need to work more with our partners, Preservation North Carolina, for example, to obtain the funds. So really, all we would want to do, this was just to make clear that we're not trying to make a profit from this. We're just trying to make sure that you're happy. There may be fees involved with rezoning or whatever else we have to do for this property. But that's all that meant.
I see. Well, we've been talking, just last month about how we need to be selective about just, what we do with city property and any potential sales. So, I would think at a minimum we'd want an appraisal and to see whether there are any other interested parties interested in perhaps this property, because that's what I was told we needed to do when we wanted to build a Class A commercial office building that would, have a company headquartered here and provide 30 high-paying jobs in the city. So I'd assume we'd want to do the same thing in connection with this. But
I don't want to spend our time doing that. We had an offer several years ago on this particular piece of property for the benefit of the newer council people, and we turned it down. This property was donated with regard to the life-saving crew, and Parks had to spend a huge amount of time protecting it because of some things that happened. And then it was used for the AA building. And I'm not in favor at all of this particular piece of property being sold. And partially I have personal interest because my father-in-law through his company was the one that donated this. So I do not want to spend our time. And I don't think it's appropriate if we wouldn't sell it to a previous person who wanted it for us to look at it now as well. So I will not be in favor of doing anything further with this. Not that I don't want to support your cause, but this is just not an appropriate situation for us to think about selling the property.
Did we have this property included in the list of properties that we had appraised? I'm assuming we didn't, but.
No, sir.
Okay.
Ryan?
Do you have anything you want to add? I know you were involved with bringing this to us.
Well, I don't know that I was involved in bringing it to us. I think they reached out to all of the council. I think the previous offer was for the entire property, not to divide the parcel. I mean, what you have is 1.6 acres, and half of it is a wooded lot, and that's what they're seeking. So it's not exactly apples and apples. They're looking at, developing or purchasing the undeveloped portion of it.
Yeah, but just to be clear, we have no desire to interfere, disrupt in any way the mission of the house at all.
But the other piece of this too, if you're, and I'm not involved in Alcoholics Anonymous, but I would think based on what I know, that you want that to be separate from everything else. and to put a house next door to it, I don't think that works well. I just really do not.
I think this is a tricky property for the reasons Martha brought up. It was donated to us for a particular purpose. And, you know, for example, if you donated the house to us for a particular purpose and then you decided to sell it to somebody else, it's hard to hold up to that. But as far as wasting your time goes with appraisals and all that, I think you're all over here at $31,000 and I'm in Key West at a whole different price. And so I'm more than happy to run this through a process of appraisals, open bidding, but I think we're out in left field on this.
So you're talking about, 10 times what we would be willing to offer.
I'm not an appraiser, but we just sold.
Well, that's the difference between Key West to
we
me.
literally just sold a piece of property back to the mill developer, Imperial Mills, who was just presenting here, because they didn't do 1,000 square feet of trees for the same price. So just to kind of keep that in perspective from a price, like $30,000 is what they just paid us not to have open space on a really small area. So it's just hard for me to connect the dots financially on that piece. But yeah, I think that property's worth a lot more money. And my first obligation is the prudence of the financial situation of the city of Belmont.
All right.
Yeah, I had similar thoughts because history is very important to me. And I think what you're doing is a very valuable service to our community. It just the 31,000 just feels low to me. Like I'm not necessarily opposed in principle to doing this, but of course, being right next to the AA house too is something that I could also see creating some issues. But I guess the biggest stumbling block I'm having is the price. I would expect that if we did put this out to bid, you'd probably have a lot of interest if we came in at 31, just because of its location. And, it's in Belmont, so everything here is very expensive. But that's kind of where I'm at.
Do we need to make any sort of motion or vote, or is just sort of the consensus of?
Yeah, it sounds to me like y'all aren't interested, but I think you need to tell us you're not. So.
Yeah.
They've not made a formal request to purchase property. They've not made an offer to the city, so there's no.
I'm happy to go through the exercise. I'm not sure it's a good.
Right. Well, we are under a time crunch at this point as well. So to pursue options that, are probably going to be out of our reach. The only other thing that I would like to say is that, we want to preserve this as a house, but given the zoning is currently mixed. Oh, okay. So, right, either that, or we would need to sell the property as a protected property, but for commercial use, which is also still possible as well. Just wanted to throw that out there. We have a little bit of wiggle room in terms of what we could probably get through our partnerships, but we are a nonprofit and we're not trying to, make any money from this. We're just trying to preserve history. So we probably couldn't get to Key West. We could maybe get to, I don't know.
Well, I don't know.
Aiken, Georgia.
I don't know what the property would go to. I mean, we're saying Key West, but, it is an upset bid process. I don't know where the bid starts. I mean, you could find yourself being the only bidder, or you could find yourself in a bidding war for the property. Every 10 days, someone's upsetting someone's prior bid to the point to where it's no longer feasible.
Right.
So, and there's no way to predict that.
Absolutely. Well, we knew that part was a risk anyway.
Well, let's just proceed on to the next.
All right. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is page 8, page 97 rather, yard waste collection updates.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like for our Public Works Director, Bill Carroll, to give you a brief update since it is late. on our 1 month experiment of in-house yard waste collection.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for recognizing me this evening. So up front, I did want to mention something briefly in the fact that we're talking a little bit about Belmont and the yard waste program. I thought it would be good to mention Keep Belmont Beautiful and their Flower Power project and all the work that they're doing for our downtown flower beds and keeping those nice and de-weeded throughout the year, especially in spring and summer. So I just want to, briefly thank them and thank our volunteers who help the city out, because it does help us out a lot. And I got a report this morning from our Keep Belmont Beautiful Executive Director that the value of the volunteer time is roughly $11,000. So that's something well worth noting at the top here. Aside from that, just a brief recap of yard waste services. So this fiscal year, starting on July 1, you brought yard waste services in-house for collection, and we've been doing that since then. Waste Pro ended their services on June 30th. So just some data, so you all are aware of where the data stands. We've had 258 citizen requests so far, and that's in the month of July. We had a total tonnage of 43.53 tons. We had 5 complaints. We closed most of those complaints within 24 hours, and we had 2 compliments. So that's good. Nice to mention. And just as a comparison to how Waste Pro was operating before, they average roughly 65 complaints a month. They do resolve most of those within 5 to 6 hours, and they typically have, let's see here, 94 requests for service, meaning delivering carts and that kind of thing, repairing carts. So that's just some brief data I wanted to mention to you. So far it's gone well. We've learned a lot in the first month. We're continuing to learn and change our methods as we go. So far, I think the city looks pretty good considering where it was at. And I did mention this in a memo to the city manager, but the Waste Pro numbers of yard waste tonnage was only 14.67 tons for the total month of June, compared to where we were at in the month of July, 43. So I feel like we outperformed Waste Pro with existing staff, and so far it's gone very well. Let's see here. So I did want to mention that Waste Pro's average tonnage for yard waste and leaf a month is typically around 50 tons. So we're right in that ballpark. And keep in mind that once we go to leaf collection in the fall, that will grow quite exponentially. So I think at the end of the year, when we come back and review the year, we'll be well above the average that Waste Pro was picking up, especially if we maintain a high level of service. I did want to mention also that signs are up around town. That was a suggestion some people had, and we're welcoming that. Any suggestions you may have about getting it out to the public. We have signs up around town. We have, I believe, 20 around town in certain areas, similar to where we put our bulk waste signs for pickup, telling people exactly how to submit requests online. We've also been putting out door hangers at nearly every residence that has left yard waste out. Even those who requested, we want to make sure we give everybody the information they can so they can make informed decisions. And we've also been utilizing social media as well to get those who may be on social media, as well as some stuff on our utility billing. We put in flyers and whatnot to inform the public the best we can. We're also having daily conversations and having a public information campaign via phone whenever we do have call-ins. And my administrative assistant, Crystal, who's been excellent and got a ton of positive feedback, has been explaining the ordinance and our decision and our request system to them as well. So far it's gone very well. We're learning, and I encourage you all to talk to your neighbors, talk to your communities, your HOAs, get them involved, let them know how to submit a request. And they of course can go to cityofbelmont.org/yard waste. That's the easiest way to do it, or they can call us here, and we'll take care of it. Yes, Mayor.
What's the number they have to call to get yard pickup?
704-825-0507. And now good.
And so there's no regularly scheduled pickups that you just call in and set
So
an appointment?
the way we're currently doing it, we found it would probably be better as far as staff resourcing to designate a day. So what we're doing is submitting, if we ask that the public submits their yard waste requests online or via phone call, and we'll come out by Tuesday at 12 p.m., and then we'll come out that Wednesday or Thursday if we have a large week. Typically, we've been getting most of the lists done on Wednesday. I will mention that we have been picking up yard waste that we see on the route and leaving out door hangers because we know there's a transitionary period and we're trying to inform the public the best we can.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Sounds like it's a success. Good.
So far.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Looking forward to leaf collection.
appreciate that.
Yeah, that's gonna be fun.
Next, we have the committee reports.
Thank you, Mayor. The next items you have are the draft minutes from your various citizen advisory boards and committees. So you've got the draft minutes from the Downtown Belmont Development Association Board from their June 17th meeting, the Main Street Advisory Board from their June 17th meeting, the Environmental Sustainability Board from their July 13th meeting, and the Historic Preservation Advisory Board from its July 14th meeting. And then for the manager's report, since it's late, I'll be very brief. We have a lot of activities this week. So for those of you that are here and the millions of people still watching via YouTube, I want to make sure that you're all invited to the National Night Out event tomorrow night that the police department is hosting in Stowe Park. That begins at 5:30 p.m. at Stowe Park tomorrow, Tuesday, August the 3rd. This Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, the Black Star Theater Company, I think that's the correct name, they're performing the SpongeBob the musical play in Stowe Park at the new amphitheater. That begins at 7 o'clock on Thursday and Saturday and 6 p.m. on Friday. Your website's accurate, thank you. The reason they're having the earlier start on Friday is because we also have a Friday Night Live concert on Friday night, which begins, the concert will begin at 8 o'clock. We've shifted that an hour later because of the heat. We will have the Zach Brown Band cover band this Friday, so lots of opportunities for entertainment in downtown on Friday evening. And then, of course, on Saturday, August the 7th at noon, we will have the grand reopening ceremony at Rocky Branch Park. So we welcome everyone to come out for that. And then the final Friday Night Live concert for this year will be Friday, August the 20th at 7, and that will have the Dave Matthews Band cover band. That's all that I have for you this evening.
Thank you.
Adrian, let me ask you one question. I was looking at the minutes, dog park update. I can't remember, did we come to a conclusion? I don't know, is council formally supporting a dog park? Or
No.
have we gotten there? Or I just can't recall.
You're correct. I've done some research on that, and that's actually about other business, but we'll go ahead and talk about it since you brought it up. What I said is that this has grown legs and begun walking because we have a dog park subcommittee. To my way of thinking, it should be under Parks and Rec. Parks and Rec, to my knowledge, has not formally adopted a site or designated a site, and neither have we. And we have seen in those minutes that a grant they tried to secure a grant. That's procedurally, that very much concerns me. So I think we have too many people going too many directions on this, and we need to make sure we get everything streamlined.
Well, yeah, those are exactly the points I wanted to make. I mean, if we are giving direction, I guess my question is, if we haven't given clear guidance or direction to, we want a dog park. My first question is, why is our Park and Rec director signing a letter of support for a grant for the dog park? And then I guess I would ask Bill, Public Works Director Bill Carroll should be providing site confirmation letter. What exactly does that mean? We haven't approved the site, have we?
You would have to approve that site.
Okay, so if we haven't approved it yet, how do you provide a site confirmation letter or telling them that you're going to do it in advance of us making any declaration?
I think that's in reference to, I think the proposed site is the water plant property, the front portion of the water plant property. I've not been too involved with the whole project itself. It would just be, I guess the designation of that site for use of the dog park, assuming the city council approves it and the grant proceeds. But again, I haven't been applied.
Okay, well, I'll say, I'm neither for nor against the dog park, but what I am for is process. And I think we have a process, and I don't think it's been followed. It seems like there's kind of been, I hate to use the term end run to get this dog park, but in some instances, I feel like there has been an end run. We have not made any declaration, either negative or positive, or selected a site. So I mean, I caught that, I just need some clarification.
If I could just add a little bit to that, so the process and I don't remember exactly when this conversation started. It's been at least a year, it may be 2 years. So this came out of the Main Street Board wanting a dog park downtown. They looked at sites downtown, couldn't find a suitable site downtown. Looked at the Kevin Lofton Riverfront Park, that was not deemed appropriate. They looked at city-owned property so that you would have lower cost. We looked at the vacant area in front of the water park, the water plant on East Catawba Street as the best site for a potential dog park. The Main Street Board had a subcommittee looking at that. They then presented that to the Parks and Recreation Board. I believe that, and we have a Parks and Recreation Board member here, so if I get my dates wrong, please correct me. But sometime this spring, the Dog Park Committee of the Main Street Board presented this to the Parks and Recreation Board. The Parks and Recreation Board had questions about the site plan, the design, what's included, the maintenance, the cost, and asked for more information to be done to have an actual plan for the dog park. They also created a subcommittee of the Parks and Recreation Board that consisted of Parks and Recreation Board members as well as Main Street Board members. They then worked with city staff on the site plan and the cost estimate, which I've shared with you, the results of that. The dog park subcommittee of the Parks and Recreation Board will be presenting their findings, their plan, their work to the Parks and Recreation Citizens Advisory Board at their meeting later this month in August. Then it will be up to the Parks and Recreation Board to recommend proceeding with the project or not proceeding with the project. So and I think the kind of the concern from the advocates for the park and some city staff members is to your point exactly. There's not been affirmative support for the park from the council, but there's also not been, we don't want this park, so don't proceed with it. So the committee that's working on it is doing what the Parks and Recreation Board advised them to do. So they'll be coming back to them to report out their findings later this month.
Well, let me ask you a question, because I guess I don't understand the parameters of area. If if they were looking downtown, that's within their prerogative. This site does not seem to qualify to be under their purview because it's not part of downtown. So at that point, does that not become, should they not exit that process and hand that off strictly to Park and Rec? Because this is not within their scope, this area.
Yes, sir, you're absolutely correct. And so that is what's happened. So the Main Street Board, realizing that they didn't have anything within the Main Street boundaries of our Main Street program, took it to the Parks and Recreation Board. Now, there was some members of the Main Street Board have remained on the subcommittee of the Parks and Recreation Board with members of the Parks and Recreation Board, because it is outside of the Main Street boundaries, so they've turned it over to the Parks and Recreation Board. So that's why they're reporting back to the Parks and Recreation Board for that.
But then why are we seeing in those minutes about that subcommittee report there? In other words, that's just what we got this round. So that, have they just now realized this, or what happened?
So I'm assuming that you're referring to
The grant application.
The Main Street minutes. Yes, so that was a report to the Main Street Board from that subcommittee. That's one of the Main Street members of the Parks and Recreation subcommittee, reporting back to the Main Street Board to keep them informed of what's going on.
So there is a subcommittee under Parks and Rec with regard to the dog
It's sort of
park?
a joint subcommittee, but it's something that the Parks and Recreation Board requested to be done. They requested a committee. They requested the work to be done.
So the other concern that I have, and we don't need to address it tonight, but we now have a complex, and we're talking about eventually having the Friday Night Live concerts at the park. then we've got to be real conscious of how many parking places we need and have, because that road out there is not particularly good. So we need to be really careful. And Richard, I'm not for or against it, but we are going to have to look at a big picture with regard to this as well.
I would just ask the Park and Rec person here, I mean, does everything sound right? Because I'll be honest with you, I don't know.
The dog park people have just come, have just come time and time to give us an update, but they never really gave us anything else. So I am not aware that we have, I'm not aware with everything I said right now.
Well, there is a dog park subcommittee on the Parks and Recreation Board, because when applicants were interviewing with us to be reappointed, I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm misremembering, that Michael Warsaw said that he was on said dog park subcommittee of the Parks and Recreation Board.
Are you active on the board now?
Yes, she is. Yeah, she is.
I didn't know that. It just wasn't clear.
It sounds like there's a group of volunteers trying to get something done, and the day they show up here to us, the first question out is, what grants have you applied for? And they'll be able to answer that question based on the process that they're following, and we can always shoot it down in the future, but it sounds to me like they're trying to get all their ducks in a row before they come to us with this. And I know it seems a little bit I think that there is a lot of confusion about where Richard made and stuff. I'm not sure why there's so much tension involved with it.
Let me just say, I was on the county Parks and Recreation when we had the dog park down at Poston Park. You talk about a war. That was the toughest thing we've ever had.
I'm happy to hear anybody out on the project.
I mean, I think they're, I'm.
You guys are on the Main Street board.
Yes.
I'm sure you're aware of what's going on.
Yes.
Yeah, we get the updates. I'll admit to being a little fuzzy on the relationship between the subcommittee and the Main Street Board and Parks and Rec.
I just know, I mean, I'll say this, ultimately, I'm where Martha and Richard are, in that, like, I'm neither for nor against. We have to consider everything on the merits. I don't think they're trying to make an end run around anything. I think they're operating in good faith. I think there is a group that wants the dog park, and they're willing to fundraise and look for grants and sort of help raise money, much the same way that the individuals behind the Davis Court Tennis Park renovations and the Rocky Branch Park trail improvements have been operating. I don't know. All this, I don't understand it. I don't understand I don't know what I think about the dog park, but I get tired of hearing all this squabbling about who should be in charge of what and who's, I don't know.
But it needs to be under Parks and Rec, but however you're going to play it out, so everything's done appropriately.
So is Parks and Rec hearing a presentation this month to make a
my understanding.
recommendation?
The Parks and Rec subcommittee is reporting to the Parks and Rec board this month.
Well, I mean, there's also the question, we were going to come up with a process on how we would receive donations and grants for items on the CIP.
Yes.
And how we were going to deal with that, because the CIP is a list that people put together, as you're aware, how they rank priorities of the city. Okay, so when people start to have enthusiasms for a project, whether it's a basketball court, a tennis court, or a bike park, things that are on the CIP down here, do we supplant the other items which have been identified as top projects because we've received those donations? We don't seem to have a process for that. I think we're, need to establish that.
Yeah, I have that. Adrian's given me some feedback on it. I'll send it over to everybody so you can provide feedback to me as well. I don't think anything's come to us, but that was one of the things I volunteered to do about 6 months ago or so.
But, and perhaps if I'd known that, it might not have taken 16 years to get the skateboard park. Hey,
You're getting your money's worth out of it, is all I can say.
All right.
All right. Now you want to go to other business now?
Other business,
Okay.
right. We're gonna start out with Ron.
I just want to congratulate Mark on the second child.
Mhm.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congrats.
Richard?
Yeah, you know, we were just informed that we are going to be receiving, I guess, $4 million on the American Rescue Plan, COVID-related American Rescue Plan, and the parameters on how we can spend that money. Me personally, I hope that we will seriously consider our infrastructure. I know there are going to be a lot of people coming to us with ideas and projects to get some of that money, but we've got a lot of water and sewer issues, even roadway. I don't know if it's applicable to roads, okay, but we have plenty of water and sewer issues. I'm gonna identify this as found money. I mean, we weren't expecting it, so this is a windfall for us. And this would be a great way to start checking off some of these nagging issues in the city that we've not been able to take care of. The Tower Crest, that is the development by the water tower over on Oak, is that correct? I was driving by today, and I guess I don't understand the fall zone for that water tower because it looks like the pads that are closest to it are very close to that water tower. I mean, it would seem to me, just based on how I saw the pads, and granted, I do not know the height of that water tower, but I mean, it's easy calculation, height, fall distance, I mean, it just seems close. I'm sure everything's okay. Visually, it looks like it's gonna hit those pads if it falls. And at our next work session, I'd like us to talk about the city seal versus our branding seal. You know, we had discussions when it came to us for funding to seek a company to develop a seal. It came to us and asked us to finance that, and we did. And parameters of that seem to be, and I've talked to a couple of council folks, and they seem to have the same recollection that I do, that this was a marketing tool, that this was going to be used for tourism and marketing, et cetera. But it wasn't going to supplant the city seal. You know, I now see it up here on, I guess, what could be considered official documents of the city. This is our agenda. The city seal is not on the outside of this building, but the marketing emblem is incorporated into CityWorks. The letter that I received, your invitation for the candidates to meet, the letterhead was Belmont with, you know, the marketing, branding. Some of these candidates are going to assume that's the city seal, possibly. I think we need to revisit that discussion because I thought we made it clear. There's a lot of pride and history in that city seal. And a lot of these documents in places where I see it do seem to qualify as official. So, I mean, that's my opinion on it. If the view has changed or you all remember it differently, then that's fine. But I've just noticed that it's popping up everywhere and does not seem to be living up to the spirit of how it was presented, in my view. And that's all for me.
Jeff?
Well, congratulations, Mark. Let me echo what Ryan said. You know, I'm interested to learn more about a future community meeting like we had at Aberfoyle, because I think that was very successful, and so I'm anxious as things open up, I guess, to schedule more of those. I want to talk about Tower Crest a little bit, slightly different than what Richard mentioned, because that was one of the areas where we had some residents send some pictures with some mud and various flooding. And I know we talked, and you said you were going to send that to Gaston County. And I know that was a very large amount of rain in a short period of time, so that might be a unique event. But I also know that Richard shared something similar that was going on there a few weeks or maybe even a month before. So that's happened twice there that we know of. And so that's concerning because residents do see that and they say, well, you know, I understand, you know, development happens, but, you know, come on. So, you know, I do understand that point, that, you know, I don't know exactly what the situation was, but I do want to make sure that when we approve things, that everyone is compliant with everything they need to do, because we approve things with conditions in order to protect resources and property and whatnot. And we've heard various times, I know we had an issue getting Dent Wizard to comply with certain conditions. We've had the issue with Walmart and Lowe's not, you know, having all that trash. And so if we're going to put conditions and ordinances in place, then I do think we should make sure that the people that agree to those conditions live up to those. And I'm not saying that they weren't, because you know, I don't know for sure. I know that there have been 2 reports of issues with that site, and there was at least one heavy rain, and you know, it seemed out of the ordinary. But I do think that's important, that we make sure that there's compliance with these conditions, because they're there for a reason. And then the last thing I'll say is, you know, I'm sure there will be some unhappy people after our vote earlier tonight, and you know, they'll say, well, we didn't listen, we didn't, you know, we listened. I listened. I understand their concerns and their fears, but I'm also, while I listen, I'm constrained by the law. I can't not listen to the law and what the law said were the relevant considerations, and what would have been the repercussions of not adhering to those considerations. So I listen, but they're just, you know, I hope that the developer can continue to work with them and find solutions to allay some of their fears. But I also have to listen to the law, and the law was clear as to what the findings were. The findings were met, and that's how I felt constrained to vote.
I just want to congratulate Mark Steelinger too.
I've never been this popular.
You'll have a lot of sleepless nights the next few nights.
Next few.
Next few years.
Next few.
Yeah, I can hope.
We all know what that's like. Martha?
Several things. First of all, the Catherine Court meeting, we have staff. This is a manager council form of government. We have looked at the Catherine Court issue before, and it really concerns me that 3 of our 5 members met with that group. It does not bode well for us with our team that we're trying to build. Yeah. This is very concerning to me, and we involved a staff member too. So I just want to mention that, because it is very concerning to me. Yeah. 2 requests of staff. 1, I contacted Morgan Houchard with regard to the sidewalk, and he assured me that would be completed before the school year began. You know, when we extended by McKee and up through there, would you contact him also? Because he told me there was a quick turnaround. There's going to have to be a very quick turnaround. The other thing is, could we also get a Division 12 report with regard to our 2 intersections, one at Park Street and one at the Bojangles intersection? I left Myers Park today at 4 o'clock. I've managed to go by the airport, all through Charlotte traffic, did not run into any kind of major problem until I hit 6th Street, and it was not moving. And I've also now had complaints from the people in the Vineyards area who come over here and shop, and they said, what is wrong with the traffic signal situation? So I would like a written report so we know what the timing is. They keep telling us that they are looking into it and all that kind of thing, but we're not seeing, I think, what we need to see. So hopefully Division 12 can do as well as the people coming out of Charlotte. So that's all for me.
I agree.
Well, just say thank you for all the well wishes, thoughts, and prayers, and all of that. Certainly appreciate it. I just had a few things. The code enforcement, I know we talked about maybe kind of tightening up some of our rules there, putting some more teeth into them. I'm still interested in doing that. You know, so whenever staff is ready to present, I'd love to hear it. Also, just like to call out the Parks and Rec has been doing these pop-up recreation events around town. I think those are great, particularly the way they've kind of done them in different parks around the cities that everybody can participate. They're just kind of a fun summer activity. And that's it.
Thank you.
Oh, I did congratulate Mark, and I told him, he sent me a picture of this little boy, and he has a very serious look on his face, and I suggested that he should run for city council.
All right. Next, that brings us to a closed session.
I move that we go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318-11A5.
I'll second.
To discuss potential property acquisition by the city.
Second.
Got a motion and a second.
Got a second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye. Is there anyone?
Closed session.